And let's be sure the mic's working again. Good morning, one and all. You're listening to Radio Westchester. This is your radio station at the train station, and we're checking levels here, obviously. So give us just a second. We're doing the show remotely, as you might guess, for one of the first times in a while. We will not be at the station for some time, given. Well, we have to recognize the coronavirus, and that's all we can say about that right now. But nonetheless, welcome to the program once again. It is 39 degrees, overcast skies on this Monday, April 13th. 2020. Our headlines this morning: high winds and coastal flooding headed our way. Test sites are also closed. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. A third of America did not pay April rent. Governor Cuomo is not sure when schools and businesses will reopen, as 188,000 plus are infected here in New York State, with 9,500 dead, nearly 9,500 dead, 758 in 24 hours as of yesterday morning. And we'll get to the numbers here in Westchester as well. And a fire in Mount Vernon leaves a house in ruins. Once again, welcome to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. This is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. And a busy day it is. Let's get to those headlines. Our top story of immediate concern is the weather. A powerful spring storm began overnight, early this morning, if you will, that could lead to widespread damage and power outages. And we will go to the weather now. And one of the worst aspects of it this morning is that the testing site in Glen Island Park has been closed, as well as other sites in the region. The weather is that bad, so we will get to it now. Right now, again, it's 39, overcast. Expect showers and high winds throughout the day. Really only 20% chance of rain, but the rain will be part and parcel at times. Winds throughout the day. Gusting from 50 to 60 miles an hour. Risk of downed trees and power lines. Thunderstorms are possible. And once again, if you were scheduled for a coronavirus test at Glen Island Park, the site is closed because of the weather. We will keep you informed. Again, it'll get up to the mid-60s today despite this weather. Now, tonight, cloudy, breezy, scattered showers, 43 degrees. Moving to Tuesday, a mixture of sun and clouds, 55, and then at night getting down to 38. Wednesday, mostly cloudy, scattered showers again, 46 the topper, and then at night getting down to 35. It's not quite spring yet, or at least fully. And Thursday, partly sunny, 51, and at night getting down to a chilly 36 degrees. All right, we get back to the rest of our headlines. Once again, this is Radio Westchester. Now, we have, if you're listening on any of our audio channels, everything is fine. If you're watching on Facebook or listening on Facebook, you won't see me this morning. It's going to take another few days before we add all the video aspects, but you will see a steady screen with a dumb little picture of me. What's a sketch, actually. And but you still can listen to the program on Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, you name it, the YouTube. We are out there on it. And of course, the main outlets, RadioWestchester.com, Mornings with Bob Marrone, MyTuner Radio, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, iHeart, and iTunes. So welcome to the program once again, and we get back to the headlines. The pandemic is making it harder to make ends meet. One of our top stories this morning: the loss of business and a paycheck has resulted in one third of Americans. Now, these are just rents. One third of Americans unable to pay their rent, some 13 million people. And we're talking about April 1 in those numbers. Now, of course, each month there are people who are late with their rents, but this is an incredibly high number. Again, one third of Americans who pay rent could not pay their April rent. Now, on the plus side of all this, the stimulus payments have actually begun. The first might have been received, and they started sending them out on Saturday. And they may have well hit some bank accounts because the first payments were those who, when they filed their taxes, put in a bank account that it could be sent directly to, or direct pay, if you will. So they hit as early as Saturday. Now, those who get a check in the mail are going to wait somewhat longer, perhaps a couple, maybe more weeks. And for those who did not file a return in 18 or 19, 2018 or 2019, it may take a little while longer. And Governor Andrew Cuomo announced yesterday that New York State is seeing a flattening of new cases of the virus, offering a glimmer of hope, but noted that it does so at a terribly high level, with 9,385 deaths among 188,000 infected in New York State. 758 died in the 24 hours between Saturday and Sunday. Later this morning, he will have updates to those numbers during his daily address. Now, so far in Westchester, there have been 19,313, of which 511 have passed away. We will be talking with George Latimer at 7:35 this morning, and he'll give us his latest information, and we'll see what else is going on. New Rochelle has had 1,088 cases of the virus, 22,000 here in the United States. It is in New Rochelle. It is 6:36. And I gave that number wrong. Here in New Rochelle, there's 188 cases. Across the United States, there are some 22,000 in the U.S. Governor Cuomo also said he was not sure when or if schools would reopen this calendar year, if you will, or rather this school year, or when the state would reopen. He stressed that this would have to be coordinated among the tri-state, that is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and that if and when we return to normal, there would be some give and take, and things might be done regionally. Again, despite the fact that the mayor of New York City, Mr. de Blasio, has closed the schools for the rest of the school year, the governor has not yet confirmed, or denied for that matter, and has not made a final determination about that. A group of police unions has started a petition for hazardous pay. This follows a plea by several public officials to do the same for all first responders, as well as set up a fund for those injured or killed during the crisis. And while this is early, the speculation is that these things are almost certain to happen. It is almost, and something worthy of heroic proportions. It is actually something to see these doctors and nurses and EMS workers and police, some 20 in New York have already passed away. To see these people go out knowing that they could get the virus and even die from it is quite remarkable. And again, some police unions, other organizations are talking about such hazardous pay. It makes total sense. As we come up now on 6:40, the MTA, with 50 of its workers dead, has began taking the temperature of its workers when they report to work each day. And obviously, if they have a temperature, they're being sent home or for testing. Here in Westchester County, the district attorney Anthony Scarpino has authorized the release of 65 Westchester jailed inmates due to the virus and virus fears. And this follows a pattern that has gone on through several counties and areas in New York State and around the country. In Rockland, the death toll has hit 200 of 7,120 cases. Testing tested rather positive for the virus. Meanwhile, the Governor Andrew Cuomo, stopped short of granting a county emergency order that would have tightened the rules regarding grocery stores and drugstores, made them much firmer in terms of when they close, what they sell, et cetera, and perhaps tightened the hours, etc. The governor would not approve that, saying that the goodwill that they have and the expectations that they have of drugstores and groceries have been largely observed throughout the state, and so no reason to do that. Now, one upside of the virus, and people are talking about this, if you do have occasion to drive around, particularly on the major highways, you'll notice lots of repair crews. They expect earlier and perhaps even less expensive repairs due to less overtime as the result of the virus. Firefighters put down a two-alarm blaze. It's nice, Robert. Sometimes early in the morning, thinking the mouth does not work. A two-alarm blaze on Easter Sunday that destroyed a Mount Vernon home on South 10th Avenue. Officials at the scene believe no one was home and that no one was injured, obviously, but the fire did spread to the home next door. It is 6:41. Now, the president is in a tough spot, as you know. He wants to open the country up as soon as he reasonably can. He has said, though, that he will listen to his experts before he does that. And unfortunately, yesterday he did tweet, and this came as quite a shock. He tweeted a fire Fauci tweet that came from another member. I do believe it was a member of the Congress, but the point is that the president was in effect saying he did not agree with some of Fauci's concerns, but now he has retweeted that particular tweet two times again overnight. Again, Trump is in effect saying perhaps Fauci should be fired, wondering what the reaction would be if he did that after, of course, recently having fired two inspector generals who found on issues that he did not agree with. And it is thought that his influence resulted in what has now become the controversial firing of the commander of that aircraft carrier out in Guam. It is coming up on 6:42. Yesterday was Easter Sunday, obviously, and a happy Easter to all and a happy Passover to those of you celebrating that holiday. But churches and temples were empty for the first time in anyone living's memory due to the virus, which has captured, I shouldn't say the imagination, but which has captured the attention of the country. Some 82% of the American public now say they're very concerned about the virus. No surprise, really, there. Apropos of that, the mental health lines are up 891%. Again, 891%. That owing to, of course, concern about the virus, but also people being sequestered in their homes. And most police and other law enforcement issues or organizations are telling us that they're seeing an increase in domestic violence, an increase also in child abuse. These are difficult times. On the other end, a great increase in different social websites, things like, of course, Facebook, but we're seeing a lot of people using FaceTime on their phones. They're using Skype They're using all of those different meeting sites, both video and audio. And obviously, we're doing that here. It is 6:44. Now, Trump did do something yesterday that I think he deserves a lot of credit for. While all this other stuff was going on, the president moved to stabilize oil prices by cutting a deal with the Saudis, Russians, and others. Now, this is more important than it sounds. There's too much oil on the market. The price is dropping. It's hurting economies. But more importantly, one of the things that started this crisis was the Russians pushing hard to get prices low in an attempt to weaken America's prices, or rather, in an effort to bring the price of oil lower than the price of oil produced by American fracking, thus injuring the American fracking industry. So, put a win in the column for the president regarding that. Again, a move has been made by the president, an agreement reached to stabilize oil production around the world, and that should keep the Russians from being able to diminish the value of our fracking. Now, believe it or not, it may not be Disneyland out in Disney or Disney World out in California. Disney has laid off 43,000 people. All righty, it's time to take a break. It is 6:46. You're listening to Radio Westchester. When we come back, we're going to tell you how allergies could affect whether or not you get the virus and your chances of getting it. But first, we do have to go back to the weather. And believe me, folks, the weather's our top story today. It's 39 right now in New Rochelle. It is overcast. We're going to get up to the mid-60s today. You can expect some showers, but the real issue, high winds throughout the day, gusting from 50 to 60 miles an hour. If you put out the lawn furniture already, you might want to take it in if it's still time. The risk of downed trees and power lines is very real. Thunderstorms are also possible as we go through the days. Now, if you had an appointment or were going over to and why did that music stop? Come on. All right, we don't need music anyway. We'll use something else later. Boo-hoo to the music. All righty. Now, if you had an appointment over at Glen Island or one of the other testing sites here in Westchester or the surrounding areas, you may want to double check it. We know that they have closed the testing site over at Glen Island because of the weather. And once again, we're stressing down trees are possible, power lines are possible. And, in this program, we don't like to make too much of this, but in looking at all the weather reports overnight, they're saying this is going to be a severe windstorm. So please act accordingly. We may have some thunderstorms as well. Now, tonight, after the wind blows away, if you will, be cloudy. Still be breezy, though, with scattered showers getting down to about 43. Tuesday, a mixture of sun and clouds, 55 during the day. Tomorrow night, 38, and on into Wednesday, mostly cloudy, scattered showers again, 46 during the day, 35 at night. Now, Thursday, partly sunny, 51, and at night, chilly, getting down to 36 degrees. And we do return to, well, the news of the day. A story came out yesterday, and it requires your attention. Do you suffer from asthma? Do you suffer from seasonal allergies? And they're creating a little bit of havoc at doctor's office and emergency rooms with some justification, because in some cases they're masking the virus. In some cases, they are simply making people fear they might have the virus. And in other cases, they may well be part and parcel or contributing to it. Here is what they're saying: protect your lungs and do it preemptively. If you suffer from allergies, Now, they could weaken the particular nasal passages and membranes that are susceptible to the virus, that is, that the virus likes to cling to. So if you, and again, the virus almost always starts in the nose, sometimes in the throat, although it goes from the nose to the throat and then down the esophagus into your lungs, but it also can enter through the eyes and mouth. So if you take any type of a medication, Zyrtex or whatever, Allegra. Take it daily if you're supposed to take it daily. Don't wait for an attack. Avoid allergens if you can. If you're allergic to the cat, keep them in another room. And again, take your medication. The irritation, and we're dealing, of course, with scale here. But the very nature of allergies is an autoimmune disease in a sense. In fact, it is when the immune system attacks the particular allergens as if they're invaders. Now, that is a relatively minor irritation. It is a relatively minor creation of irritation, creation of an attack on the invaders, whereas the coronavirus creates a massive reaction, and that does result in the kind of irritation that is killing lung cells, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, if you suffer from seasonal allergies, protect your lungs by being proactive. If it's important, it creates the kind of irritation and the inflammation syndrome that even creates greater problems if too much of it exists when you have the virus. So take your medication, avoid the different types of allergens, ragweed, don't go out, trees, don't go near trees. And look, I'm emphasizing this and I'm going over the top a little bit because it will make you more prone to get the virus. It will trigger your immune system and create the kind of inflammation that actually all invaders do, but make you just a little more susceptible to the coronavirus. Now, there are some other things going on we want to get to, but two things stuck out in terms of the things to discuss. Bill O'Reilly. Now, I understand his point. I understand why he said it, but I condemn him for saying that he was being dismissive of the virus and said it's only killing those on their last legs. Well, I wouldn't even dignify that with explaining it further, other than look, there's a lot of truth to that, but in there, in the plethora of things that the virus creates, we're seeing young people get it. We're seeing people in their primes get it. We're seeing seniors and lots of seniors who have some underlying health conditions, but that we're going to live into their mid 80s. We're seeing them get it. And yes, we're seeing people who are severely compromised die. But as Governor Cuomo said, he's not willing to sacrifice his mother. Well, already each and every one of you, I'm sure, knows someone, and at minimum knows someone who knows someone. As for me, and I will get personal here, I lost one of my best friends in the prime of his life with perfect health, Olympian type athletic ability and conditioning gone. Another friend who is, and not that old, does have underlying issues, is as we speak in lockdown because he has the virus. So it touches everyone, my friends, and it's something to remember. And the other thing is, the president has, and I don't really like to take pot shots at him when it comes to his decisions with this virus. Even some of the mistakes he may have made, and he obviously made some, because my gut tells me, pardon me, that our government, and it's one of the downsides of a democracy, is probably never as ready as it could or should be for this kind of thing. And the longer you go without a pandemic, and the nature of the federal government and the size of the federal government and the conflicts and the tensions between states and the federal government, My gut tells me we wouldn't have been ready no matter who was president. They might have explained it better, but that's just my gut. And even to the extent that the president made mistakes, we would be, or perhaps not, it's an interesting question, we would be pointing fingers at whoever the president might have been. Had Hillary Clinton won the last time, had Bernie Sanders won, had John Kasich won, we don't know that they would have been any better or any worse. Maybe they would have explained it better. But one of the things we really need to do now is not look back so much, which is why it's fair game to question some of the things that the president says as opposed to what he does. What we have here, and this is worthy of criticism, is his criticism of Fauci. It would be much, and then to tweet at fire Fauci. The president has already established a pattern of simply firing people who do not agree with him or give him information he doesn't want to hear. And this is so well established that I'm not going to waste the time to list all of the people that he's fired. But that is his right. He's the president. However, in the case of Fauci, he's well respected. And look, something that doctors do, and the president, perhaps if he were more articulate, would say this. Look, Dr. Fauci's a great man. That's how I would put it if I were the president. But again, he's looking at the polls, and a lot of people, particularly down south, want Fauci fired. A lot of them are buying the nonsense that this is a hoax. In fact, I have to tell you, I was listening, and we radio nuts do this. I was trolling through the radio the other night, and there was a station coming out of upstate New York where they were calling this virus a partnership of communists and Democrats to bring down the United States and the government. It's nonsense. Now, if I were Trump, what I would do is I would say Dr. Fauci's job is not to worry about the economy. With all due respect to the doctor, he has to worry about your health. And like any good doctor, if you're 90 years old, he's going to tell you not to jog. If you go to the dentist, he's going to fill every cavity and try and straighten out your teeth and fix your gums. If you go to your cardiologist, he's going to tell you to stop eating red meat, etc. All things and almost extremists because they have to err on that side. A man or a woman who runs a government does not have that luxury. A man or a woman who runs the government has to make an informed decision on when the world must continue and some risks be sustained. That is not Mr. Fauci's job. His job is to tell me what the consequences might be. And I think if he did that, it would go a lot further with most of the American people. Now, again, if he fires Fauci, he would have to justify it. Now, he could say that Fauci was making people too afraid, or Fauci, or he can say it in an angry way, Fauci doesn't have the responsibilities that I have. And the responsibilities are great. The president's right. He will never have a tougher decision in his life. In fact, I dare say this was going to be, and this is why you got to cut the president a lot of slack. If you don't like him, that's fine. If you like him, that's fine. No matter what he does, people are going to die one way or another from this disease or from not having opened up the economy sooner. So he's got to take all of the information, we hope that he does, take all of the information can possibly get his hands on, and then make this awesome life or death decision. Now, if he fires Fauci, calling it fake news or something like that, this is my view, his presidency's over. I think this would be the bridge too far, the straw that breaks the camel's back. Now, he could simply say he's forwarding this particular tweet. And if I were his damage control officer, I would say, Mr. President, say you were forwarding that tweet so that you could show the world that some people don't have faith in Fauci to lessen his credibility. I would not do that either. But I don't know how he walks back from this. This is a very, very interesting problem. We have a number of other stories to go over with you, as well as go over the lineup for today. we have a lot to cover. But nonetheless, we are going to take another shot at the weather. And we're going to try our weather music. Now, do remember you're listening to Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he. We are not at the station today. We have joined the ranks of many, many other broadcasters. We are broadcasting remotely. Now, for those of you listening, you may say, where's my pretty face? Well, it's not that pretty. We will not have a video for another few days, but you can listen on the usual video channel, so you're hearing my voice and you're seeing a graphic that we put up last night. Of course, for people listening, or you want to listen in your cars, go to MyTuner Radio, go to the Mornings with Bob Marrone app, radiowestchester.com, hit Bluetooth, put it on the car, you're fine. We're also on iTunes, iHeart. We're on TuneIn Radio, another .com aggregator, and so forth. Welcome to the program. We do have to go to the weather. Now, the weather is brought to you this morning exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org. And the first go-round, we put it in the news because it was our top story. Why, you say? It's already, well, it's 39 degrees. It's actually up over 40 now. It's overcast. We're going to get up to the mid-60s today, but that's not the issue. Expect showers, some showers, and high winds throughout the day, gusting, and this is an incredible number for our region, 50 to 60 miles per hour. There is a risk of downed trees and power lines. Thunderstorms are possible, and this is important, folks. If you have an appointment to go over to Glen Island for a virus test, you cannot go. They have closed it because of the weather, as well as other sites. We will keep you informed. As we know, you too will know. Tonight it will be cloudy, breezy, some scattered showers, getting down to 43. Now tomorrow, a mixture of sun and clouds, and 55 at night, getting down to 38. And looking at Wednesday, mostly cloudy. Lately it's always scattered showers, and we have some on Wednesday. 46 during the day, 35 at night. Now we'll have partly sunny skies on Thursday, 51 the average temperature, but at night getting down to a chilly 36 degrees. And that is the weather for this Monday, April 13th, 2020. All righty, let's look at the lineup for today. We're going to talk about some of the other news stories in just a few moments. This next segment is brought to you by Aging Issues Management and Aging Issues Radio. Now, Aging Issues Management is available for your questions and inquiries regarding how to apply for some of the federal benefits. In fact, we're going to be talking with Joe Soroselli at 8:20 this morning about some of those, how to apply for some of those benefits. At 7:20, Vince Russo will be with us to warm things up. George Latimer joins us at 7:35. He'll tell us the latest that is going on with the county. We'll talk to Jake Schaefer at 8 o'clock. Tom Abenanti at 7:50, and of course, Bob Cox joins us for our long-form interview at 9:05. So we do thank Aging Issues Management for their sponsorship, the law firm of Pena and Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, pluginvirtualreality.com, and our friends at the Beachmont Tavern. Now, the tavern is open. A lot of the restaurants that are open where you can go and pick up food or they'll deliver it to you, they're open till 8, 9 o'clock. But because they are a tavern, a bar, if you will, the Beachmont is open from 11:30 to 1 a.m. That's 11:30 to 1 a.m. 914-636-9533. That's 914-636-9533. And I'm just looking at some of my numbers here. The way we broadcast, I have to watch certain power numbers to be sure that you can hear me properly. Oh, that's right. You can't see me today anyway, but you would have seen my head swiveling like I'm an airline pilot. Such is the nature of digital studios today. Again, getting back to our friends at Beachmont Tavern, 914 636 9533, 636 9533. And I know I make you hungry, but I am dreaming about one of their burgers with the smothered onions. The wings, they say, are the best. I say it's their burgers, but the wings are very good. And so, too, are the boneless wings. How could you have a boneless wing? Do they rip the meat off the bone? Someone should let me know. It is 7:04. And I got to look at some other stories here. Okay. 55% of Americans now say that they're sporting masks in public. And as we mentioned earlier, even more harrowing, a staggering 86% of all Americans are concerned to some degree about the virus. And this was in the New York Daily News today. Now, China has unveiled a new list of animals that can be farmed for meat. COVID 19 is thought to have originated at Wuhan at their wet market there, but they're looking at different animals now. As for me, I don't like any experimentation. And it begins as they begin to reopen. They listed some animals. I'm trying to figure out what they are here. The list of acceptable livestock and poultry includes 18 species of traditional staples such as pig, cow, chicken, sheep, goat, and more. So that's what we know right now as we pass through 7:05. I'm seeing if there's any exotic animals. So far, no. Although one pork company here in the United States, a problem that they ran into is how can I put it? They had to fire, they had to close because 43% of their people developed the virus. So the price of pork may well go up. So if you're going out to buy some ham or some pork chops, keep in mind that that could be a problem. Now, this happened out in Staten Island, and an officer pulled over a speeding car there only to find a woman giving a birth on the way to the hospital. And this was out of ABC News this morning. The woman is fine. The baby is fine. Obviously, the real issue there is bringing her to the hospital and creating that kind of risk for the mother and child. Be that as it may, when they stopped the car for speeding, those officers had quite a surprise. As we come up now on 7:06, healthcare workers are in fear of losing their jobs. It's interesting. They have the fear of having to, of course, either contract the virus or die from it. And now they have to worry about losing their jobs. Steep revenue drops have forced small and rural hospitals to lay off staff. And this is a problem. It's not happening really in the big cities where people are rushing to the denser populations, but it is happening out in the Netherlands, out in the Midwest, out in the Southwest, etc., where the virus is not as heavy, at least now, but also where hospitals have been understaffed to begin with. And this would be a difficult thing if indeed that happens. Now, when will the country get back to work? Three things to know about reopening America. And we wanted to share some of them with you. These were out of NBC News today as we head into the weekend. There's no thorough federal plan yet. At this point, states and local authorities are making decisions on whether to close schools or require that people stay home except to buy essentials. Americans, though, are still looking to the federal government for guidance on best practices. So far, the president has declined to invoke any kind of nationwide stay at home order and has instead urged Americans to embrace social distancing through the end of the month. He's also said he plans to set up a second task force focused entirely on reentry. After May 1, though, it's still unclear what might happen. When asked on Friday what metrics he might use, he pointed to the side of his head as though to imply he will rely on his smarts and said, the metrics are right here. I'm going to have to make a decision, and I only hope to God that it's the right decision. But I will say without question, it's the biggest decision I've ever had to make, and likely the president ever will have to make. Not an envious position to be in. 708. Trump said he worries about Americans leaving their homes and dying, but he added staying at home leads to death also. It is very traumatic for this country, but staying at home, if you look at numbers, that leads to a different kind of death, but it leads to death also. Hard hit states like California aren't ready to talk about their plans for reentry either, with health officials still focused on how to get overtaxed hospitals through the next couple of weeks. So, no federal plan yet, but we suspect soon there will be a plan, even if it is sequential in nature, to go back to work, perhaps in May, perhaps in June, perhaps later. We do not really know. Testing will likely play a major role, but no one knows yet what that looks like. This is the second issue. There are two types of testing that could help reopen the country. There's the nasal swab lab test that can determine if an individual is carrying the active virus. There's also a blood test that measures the level of antibodies in a person's system. The idea being that most people exposed to a virus will develop some level of immunity, thus reducing their risk. I would also add to this, folks, some folks, myself included, are under the misperception that once you've had it, you are immune, and that is not necessarily so. What we're finding out is that for different viruses, sometimes you're immune forever, or at least a great deal of time, sometimes for several weeks, sometimes for years, sometimes two. We don't know until we have the history and we do the testing. Now, Trump administration officials have floated the idea of using a combination of the tests to determine a person's risk, while there are reports of other countries considering immunity certificates for people with antibodies in their blood. But experts say there are complications with relying on both tests. With antibody tests, there are still lots of unknowns, with scientists still studying how this particular virus behaves, and researchers haven't confirmed yet that exposure translates to immunity or how long any level of immunity might last. As we said earlier, it is 7-Eleven. There are the skeptics now who say fewer people probably have been exposed to the virus than we think, creating a situation where millions, I'm just checking my phone here. I keep thinking I'm on camera, so pardon me, I'm not on camera today. Creating a situation where millions still have to stay homebound even after being tested because they discover they don't have any antibodies at all. And that's the problem. Maybe you have the virus, you get over it. Maybe you're suspected of having it. Now you not even suspected, but you don't have any antibodies. Can you go out? If you're 70 years old and you don't have any antibodies, can you go out? Even if you do, should you go back out? Will there be a limited release, if you will, of people, but folks of a certain age or a certain medical condition will be advised to stay home? We do not know that yet. Now, as for testing for the active virus, that can only determine if a person is infected and at that particular time, and would likely require repeated testing depending upon the risk of exposure. Now, a person can also test negative, then positive, which is why doctors often will test a person more than once. What's more is that the test relies on a complex supply chain and technical lab equipment. That's why they have been hard to come by. It is 7:12. Industry is jumping in for better or worse. The Trump administration has rolled back an unprecedented number of regulations in healthcare, including emergency authorizations of tests and allowing hospitals to care for patients in convention centers and other unconventional spaces. Commercial and academic labs are jumping in to help, while Google and Apple have announced plans to create a joint tool that will enable contact tracing of the virus, a venture that raises privacy concerns, but that has been tried in other countries. But with businesses looking to make a buck, some local officials are warning consumers to be wary of pop-up testing sites. There's no cure for coronavirus approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. As you know, a vaccine is still considered at least a year away from final approval. As we move forward now, some of the other stories that are making news before we go to Vince. It is now 7:13. Stores are trying to stay relevant while their doors are closed. Some are doing some advertising, but most advertising has dried up, as you know. Now, this news came out yesterday about the virus. Uh, we have been told since the beginning of this crisis that the virus, in terms of person to person, or if someone coughs or sneezes, goes about 6 feet. Well, they have reassessed it. It is now 13 feet. 13 feet. So they've also discovered, and this is for those of you who live with or who work with people who are, and you have to go to work, obviously, in some of these professions, who work at testing sites or hospitals, the virus stays. They found that on 50% of the people who work in these locations have the virus on their shoes. So please, if you are one of those folks that work that way, you're going to have to leave your shoes outside when you get home. And if you are in the house where that person works, or rather where that person returns to, and you are very vulnerable, you might not want to be there. And again, remember, 13 feet is now the distance. How we should reopen the U.S. when coronavirus slows down is, of course, the larger issue. Billionaire Tillman Fertitta claimed he laid off 45,000 workers quickly as a favor. Billionaire Houston Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta said he was doing fine after laying off 45,000 employees, claiming he was doing them a favor. I'm holding up pretty damn good, the mogul said, who is said by Forbes to be worth $4.8 billion. He told this to Fox on Saturday, but I've got 45,000 employees out there. He figures if he lays them all off, they will get unemployment benefits. Now, before we move on to guests, et cetera, and calls, what does a flattening virus curve mean to society? The U.S. reached a grim record by being the first country to see over 2,000 deaths in 24 hours. New York, the current epicenter of the nation, is seeing a slowing rate of confirmed cases, according to data. However, officials are cautioning people to not ease up on mitigation efforts. Dr. David Angus, who was with CBS this morning on Saturday, he went on to say that we could have a second wave of the virus, or people are released to go to work or to go out about their lives. So that's something we're going to have to be very, very careful about. It is 7:16. Let's see what else we have here before we move on. Social media be kids saving grace. Stimulus checks begin. Yes, the stimulus checks have started. Hair color, phrase, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Did you see, and if you didn't, two sports that are really wrestling? And we'll probably talk about this a little bit at 8 o'clock with our own Jake Schaefer. Major League Baseball is looking in late summer at some time, or midsummer or late summer, to reopen baseball by creating two leagues, one in Florida and one out in Arizona. And the teams would only play in those states. They would make up two different leagues, probably based on geography and who trains there. And they would play to an empty house. Meanwhile, the National Hockey League is doing something similar, where they're looking perhaps at some sort of an end of season effort to have their sport similarly play in empty arenas in a handful of cities or more. They've not finalized it yet. But Larry Brooks of the New York Post wrote a great piece yesterday that needs to be heeded. Even when they open up either baseball or, well, he spoke about hockey, but it applies to both baseball or hockey, to these limited seasons. And even though there will be no fans as such, you've got sports writers, announcers, the players themselves, coaches, training staffs. How will they justify? Risking these people's healths and their lives. Going to be very, very interesting for them to get their hands around. It is 7:18 and time for us to check the weather, and then we'll be back with Vince Russo. The weather, as always, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org. It's 41 degrees and overcast, although we're starting to see the winds and the weather that has everybody concerned. We're going to get up to the mid-60s today. Expect showers and high winds throughout the day, gusting from 50 to 60 miles per hour. Risk of downed trees and power lines exists. Thunderstorms are possible, but perhaps more important for some of you who may have made plans to be tested over at Glen Island Park. That testing site, as well as others, are closed because of the weather. So we will keep you informed as we know. So too will you. Now tonight, it'll be... Yo, is that loud? Oh, my. Remember now, folks, that's loud because we're still... Oh, because I put it up too loud. That's Vince Russo on the phone. We'll get to him in a moment. Sorry about that. That was only supposed to be hearable in my ear, but I put the button up too. Remember, I may have to create the studio, so things are in a little different position. Not making an excuse, but we're flying by the seat of our pants. All right, back to the weather. Tuesday, a mixture of sun and clouds, 55. Getting down to 39 at night. Wednesday, mostly cloudy, scattered showers, 46 at night, 35. And on Thursday, partly sunny, 51 during the day at night, getting down to a chilly 36 degrees. We wish to thank Aging Issues Management. Again, Joe Soroselli will be with us at 7:20. If you haven't applied for federal benefits for your business, please listen in. I said 7:20, I meant 8:20. Joe Soroselli will tell us how to do that. He's already helped me. We have a very specific question. What about the payroll replacement part? At least in my case, for my business. But many of you will have those questions and more that he will in his expose, if you will, give you. The law firm of Payne and Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, pluginvirtualreality.com, and our friends at the Beachmont Tavern, open, now get this, till 1 a.m. because they are a bar as well, 11:30 to 1 a.m. You can call up, get something to eat. You go there, you pick it up, it'll be in a bag ready for you, or they will take it to your home. You could also pick up a pop, which I mean, of course, a nice little bourbon or a beer, a glass of wine, whatever it is you like. 914-636-9533. 914-636-9533. And we move next to our first guest of the day. Again, I'm sorry you had to hear his phone ring. I forgot to lower the volume on that. Please welcome Vince Russo. Good morning, Vince.
Hey, good morning, Bob.
It's nice to have you. Can you hear me clearly?
Indeed, I can.
Well, you're on the air. Or as Dr. Ruth used to say, you're on the air. How are you? We live in interesting times. You realize people our age, and right now we're talking about 70 on the button, but between 60 and 85, whatever the case may be, we have lived through quite an era. In terms of, if you go backwards from this to 9/11, to the Vietnam War, to the assassination derby of the 60s, to Vietnam, Watergate, my goodness. But this is the first one that absolutely affected everyone in a great, 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 great way, personally.
Well, this is one of the things that, you would talk to your grandparents about the, quote, olden days, and how things were, back when there wasn't drugs and there wasn't effective treatments for diseases and things like that. And it just shows that how this thing can come around full circle, we have this virus going on and we can't handle it.
Well, yeah, actually, we can handle it, and we weren't meant to handle it in the sense that viruses keep mutating. The more I read about it, and this is not to join the bandwagon of beating up the president. I'm talking more about the dynamic of our government in general. I said this earlier. No matter who the president was, going back the last three, it's always arguable who would handle it better, who would have done this, who would have been prepared. But the health professionals have been giving these warnings for decades that sooner or later, in fact, there's a famous book, I think, out that the thing that's going to kill the planet isn't going to be people, it's going to be these viruses. So why, so we all miss the boat a little bit here. Why do you think that is?
Well, we all didn't miss the boat because we're not in charge.
No, but when I say
it,
we, I'm talking about government in general, whether it be this president or anybody else.
but uh, the Obama administration, predicted, something like this when Barack was first became president, and they were doing things to put it in place, and the Republican Congress wouldn't fund it. And then when Trump took office, they warned him and said, this is a very real possibility. And there were meetings where people from his administration, during a briefing, were saying, why do we have to be there? Some people were falling asleep, and they said this is all crock-a-baloney. And
Was that
so,
actually their attitude? I mean, I've read
yeah,
about this stuff, and
well, it was Trump's attitude. I mean, he from the get-go said it was a hoax.
well, that
People
I
were
know.
dying,
Well,
and
I
he
was
said
talking
it was
about
a hoax.
before that, but before that. Now, even going back decades, though, what I read is that we have been warned about this, and that
Yeah,
it
we
hasn't.
have.
So what you're saying is the Barack Obama administration did take it pretty seriously. Do you know if prior administrations did as well?
That I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if Breyer did. Um, but you could see everything that the Trump administration has been doing has been antithetical to dealing with this. I mean, just the other day, where they're talking about reopening the economy, which is going to be the biggest disaster going because they're going to do it way prematurely. And he put out a message, and this is a quote: "Governors, get your states' testing programs and apparatus perfected. Be ready. Big things are happening. No excuses." Is he is he out of his mind?
Yeah, maybe.
And then and he's going to. They keep saying every day he's on the verge of firing Anthony
No,
Fauci.
did you see in the last 24 hours he tweeted the fire Anthony Fauci tweet that someone sent to him. He
Yeah,
retweeted it. I think if he does that, I think it is the end of his presidency. I really do. Now, I had thought he could handle that a little bit, but even taking on his point of view for the sake of discussion by saying, look, it's his job to be the Cassandra. It's his job to absolutely guarantee the health of every man, woman, child, and bug on the planet. I have a greater decision to make. It's scary. I'm going to listen to the doctor, but I will be making decisions that might he might not totally agree with. Now, wouldn't that be a better way to explain it?
yeah, it would be a better way to explain it, but that's not not the not the rationale that he's using. I mean, it presupposes that he's actually making decisions in a logical, rational, and thoughtful way, and he's not. He's probably asking Jared what he should do.
Oh no, please don't even mention Jared to me. I haven't had breakfast yet. I did have one banana, and I don't want to throw it up.
Well,
It
Jared
is.
did solve the Middle East situation, so we have to
He
give him
didn't
that.
dissolve it. He just said, "Israel, you win." Next, that's really all he did with that. I
Uh,
mean, and that not
the thing you were saying about the sports leagues is interesting about how they're going to try to salvage something. And I guess for the entertainment value, it'll be okay. I mean, they're not going to make any money because the stadiums will be empty, or there'll be limited people be able to go if they're going to have it just in Florida and Arizona. Um, but you're right. I mean, you look at the players and the coaches and all the staffs that are involved and things like that, and those people are at risk. And can we ask them to put themselves at risk just to entertain people?
well, one of the things that's come up, and I don't know the answer, and even as I go now into depth with some of these stories for people's benefit and my own, actually, I don't know how or when they'll be able to go back because theoretically, how could they possibly go back without some sort of a vaccine? Because what do you do when the second baseman gets it? Everybody go back home? Or do
Yeah,
you,
right.
or for that matter, and it affects people of our age, it affects people of lesser ages, and again, this has been so unpredictable. suppose we do go back, and at some point, and this is why I cut the president a lot of slack by this. He will never make a decision more important than this. At some point in time, before this thing is totally eradicated, he's going to have to open up the economy, and so at some point in time, will the governors. And this is forgetting the way he tries to place blame and blah blah blah. The governors and he, and finally they'll have to come up and do something. More people are still going to die, number one and number two. But what's interesting is it can't be an all or nothing proposition, because if Vince Russo is 70 years old and has asthma, and I'm just using your name for argument's sake, and has asthma, if they do not have a virus and you don't have antibodies, and perhaps even if you do, it's probably not a good thing for you to go back to work when the world reopens.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And I think with sports and entertainment in general, I think what you're going to see is even after things open up, people is going to be reluctant to go because they're going to say, well, is there still a possibility that that I could get infected in some way? And I think it's going to be very, very slow to get crowds back and things like that. I think in general, people going to movies and plays and sporting events and things of that nature, people are still going to be gun shy for quite a while.
Well, and you know what else I would want at some point in time to know when we have herd immunity. I mean, this just is not going to be
See, I
an
think
easy
that's
thing.
a big myth. I think that herd immunity business is a bunch of nonsense. That's what they keep saying, herd immunity. I mean, it sounds like something from Fox News.
Well,
The the fact is that you know people get exposed to stuff, and supposedly they develop antibodies to it, but scientists don't know if that's happening at this point.
well, no,
And
it takes 60% of the pop. See, there's the issue that bothers me is 60% of the population will have had to have antibodies before they would even say that that was the case. So, do you know one of the big unknowns here, and it's something that Cuomo keeps saying that really needs to be listened to. We really don't know how many people have the virus because we haven't been able to test everybody. There are probably, I bet you, a multiple of one. At least twice as many people have the virus, but just didn't know it or thought they had a cold or the flu. I mean, I've been under suspicion because I had a bad sinus infection during the last 2 weeks.
mhm,
I'm not dead yet, and it got better with antibiotics, or it's almost better. So we don't know. We
true.
we do not know. So, and I'm sure people have died from the virus, and we don't know that either. So it's going to be very hard for them to come to that. Did you see what Bill O'Reilly said? I got to throw red
Uh,
meat at you. He said, "Well, the only people dying are people on their last legs anyway."
oh yeah, well, he's a
Gee.
moron.
Well, they put. By the way, speaking of which, the mental health lines up 900%. 900%. People, violence against children and violence against spouses is up. And one of the things I posted was Andy Spanos. I'm lucky. He's lucky he's alive after what he did with his wife's underwear. At any rate, we need to move on. How is it? How are your elected officials in New Jersey reacting?
Well, I think they're reacting the same way they are in New York and other rational states. I think Governor Murphy, has put quarantines in place and closed non-essential businesses and parks and recreation areas and things like that. And I think they're doing all they can do to stem the flow of this thing. You know, are people listening? Not always, and
He sounds
that's
pretty
okay.
thoughtful. You know what's interesting about every once in a while, governors in New Jersey, as opposed to Krispy Kreme, I wouldn't know, even though I see him on TV, he has an everyman's face. I wouldn't know if I saw him in the street. It's, no, really, you got these anonymous governors. Then you had the one who it would be different now, but 15 years ago came out as gay and then he became a monk. I wouldn't know him either.
Oh yeah.
He was governor at the wrong time. I actually feel for him in retrospect. If he was governor now, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But once he came out, he had to get out. He had to get out of the job. So
Well, Chris Christie was larger than life
in more ways than one.
literally and figuratively. But
He was the biggest
see,
thing in politics.
I think he would have handled this well as well.
Of course, he would have. Very, very able man. Just a
You know, I
scoundrel, but able.
definitely a scoundrel.
Yeah.
So I think he would have been okay. Look, I think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. In our little municipality, was speaking to the mayor the other day, and he said, how many times can we tell people, cover your face and wear gloves and do social
Cover your face,
distancing and
Ralph.
things
Cover
like
up your face. Cover it, Chris.
So there's not much else that can be done on the local level, on the state and the federal level. I think they're at least trying to do, what needs to be done. It's going to be a long road, and people are going to have to realize it. It's hard times.
But
are just
yeah, and you know what
ahead
we
of
do
us.
have to face sooner or later. It will be more dangerous to leave the economy closed. Perhaps we'll have to do something. What did I do? Oh, I just this new microphone I'm using is so sensitive that if I slightly move it, it goes beep 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 beep.
Oh boy.
No, but you can't hear it. But I hit it with my chin. Which say nothing, please. All right, listen, I've got to go. I got to get ready for the county executive, get his
Okay.
update. Vince, thank you very, very much. Vince Russo, everyone. We may talk to him again a little later in the program. I have some other questions I want to ask him as we get ready for the CE. You're listening to Radio Westchester. We are live today from a remote location because we have, as you would hope, we have given way to the realities of the coronavirus, the train station situation where no one's there anyway, but my continued commuting and going back and forth and my own snifflings going on, et cetera, required that I stay in one place and heed the advice of doctors, family, and others who might otherwise hit me over the head. And I got to tell you, if you get a chance, Andy Spano, as you know, the former county executive, one of our political analysts, and Anthony Galetta posted something about it. It was funny, but he did a video, and he did it in good humor. But Andy did a video of he did a video of the what it would be like to cut up a woman's underwear, which he just thought made for better masks. His explanation that his nose kept going through the hole of men's underwear. And he held up his wife's panties and he stretched them. And they looked like they could fit over a barbecue grill. And then he chopped up a bra and he's pulling the stuffing out of it. And I tried to plead with him before he posted this video. Don't do it. Don't. Yeah. So he's scheduled again for Thursday if indeed he is still alive. And again, the current county executive, we should be hearing from him momentarily. Oh, there he is. All right. Excellent. Excellent. We are about to bring him in. All right, and we move to the aforementioned county executive. Please welcome George Latimer. Good morning, County Executive. How are you?
Good morning, Bob. How are you this weary day?
Pretty good. I finally bit the bullet, and I'm broadcasting from home. It doesn't pay. It just got to the point where between my doctor and everyone else, all my commuting, and I developed a sinus infection myself. They say, "Hey, please stay in one place."
Stay home, pilgrim.
But I'm doing well. Hey, can you give us the latest update of where is the county? I know because of the weather, we've had to close. If I understand it correctly, we've had to close the site at Glen Island, the testing site.
Well, right now, with where we are this morning, and I'm going to be checking around to see the various different things. We may have a temporary closing, but it's not long term. We're actually going to be increasing the number of testing sites as the governor and other individuals, Senator Audrey Stewart-Cousins, have been promoting additional sites for testing. So whatever it is, it's temporary, as I understand it, unless we hear further news or notice. Overall, I think we're reaching a point at which we can say that we're flattening the curve. And I don't say that lightly. I've been hesitant to say that over the last few weeks when we've been talking. But over the last 5, 6 days, we've seen an increase in the number of positive cases that are somewhat less than the number of people who were tested positive 2 weeks ago, who have gone through their 2 week period of isolation and are coming out without having gotten sick. And that represents not so much when you see the list and see how many total cases we have. Oh, we have 19,000, 20,000 total positives in the county, but we only really have about 10, maybe 10 to 11,000 active cases, meaning people that are still within positive and they're within the 2 week period of potentially being sick. We're also looking at a hospitalization rate of those that are sick running in the vicinity of about 10% of all the active cases. So 100 people get sick, 10 wind up in the hospital, maybe 11, and 90, 89 wind up not being sick. And that's a better percentage than, we thought might be the case. We have 3,000 plus hospital beds in the county. We're going to be finishing up the county center's beds in the course of the next few weeks, a few days or so. So we have the potential of, we'll say for the sake of argument, 4,000 hospital beds. And right now we're using a little less than 1,200 for Westchester residents. And the big scare in Italy that we saw, and also we saw in China in the outbreak, is that the healthcare system was flooded with people that were seriously sick. And because they couldn't get the right attention, we wound up losing a disproportionate number of them. So that is a factor. And the other thing, Bob, just to download all the input that I have, the real concern is we're looking at the demographics. We're seeing, yes, that there's a higher percentage of blacks and Latinos that are, contracting the virus compared to their portion of the population. But without question, this is an age situation. When you look at the fact that more than half of the people that have been afflicted by this, approaching 60%, are people that are 70 years of age and older, that is frightening. And you have less than 10% of the people infected who are under the age of 40. So that's, what you're looking at, generally speaking, is people who've reached a certain point of their life in terms of age. They have other issues now. It comes with age.
Mm-hmm.
They also come with other behaviors, but and they are now the ones that are most subject when they get COVID to wind up passing on. And it's a frightful number of deaths. We're over 500 deaths in Westchester County alone, but we are behind Suffolk County and Nassau County, and of course New York City. So I don't view statistics as the answer here. But when you look at these numbers and you try to judge where are we, if they hold over the next week to 10 days, as they have over the last, say, 5 to 7 days, then I think, we could say that we've reached the apex that we talked about a few weeks ago with a great degree of fear. And if this is the way it's going to be the next few weeks, then the apex is not quite as scary as we thought it was.
It's these are certainly scary times. What is the mood as you go around the county, and I know you do, to check in on the different municipalities? We saw a statistic nationally today: 86% of the people are very concerned about the virus. Now, one may say, but of course, but there are levels of concern. What are you feeling in terms of the county itself?
Well, I think that people are concerned about their health, and there are people who may not fall into any of the age category or demographic category that I talked about, still don't want to catch a virus that they know has caused the death of over 500 people. I think that nervousness and anxiousness comes with a complete change in our lifestyle. This is something like none of us have ever seen. We could not have imagined it, that all work basically has stopped. I mean, you and I are working, but so many other people are not. That economics are becoming a major problem for people and for everything. I mean, for businesses, for governments, for not-for-profit organizations. The fear that we won't really get a handle on this thing for quite a while. That it might get better enough to open up some of the society, but we'll never fully open up until we have a vaccine and an antiviral treatment to kill the virus. And that kind of not knowing in a county like Westchester works particularly in a particularly large way. Consider this, that in this county, you have a large number of people that are very successful. They have, through whatever their career factors are, in business or in whatever field of endeavor they are, they've been successful. They've used their own skill. The homes that we have in various parts of this county weren't handed to people. They earned them through outstanding work in Wall Street and in law and in medicine and academia and you name it. And they're not accustomed to unsurety in their life. They use their intellect and their resources to try to blot out unsurety. And this makes everything unsure. And that makes it frustrating and a little angry because people want to know, when is this going to be over? How am I going to do this? What? There's no answers for those things. Nobody has an answer for them. Nobody on this planet can answer those questions for you. And that creates a certain agitation in a Westchester that I think is a concern. And then the final point, just in general, is you have lots of folks in this county as well, because we have a high poverty factor, and they're often people of color. But you have a poverty factor where people, are hard to change lifestyles to accommodate what this represents. The social distancing issue is a major issue. It's one thing not to be in work, but if you live in a nice private home, you got a shelter in place for 2 weeks. That's one thing. When you live in an apartment complex, and sheltering in place is a whole other thing. And I think in some of our densely packed areas with poor people and people who do work that involves them interacting with other people on a regular basis, service economy, this is it's a devastating change in their lifestyle. And it's not lifestyle, it's living, it's survival. And it is, right now we are a month and a half into the heart of this, would you say? There's a round number, maybe slightly more than a month
right.
and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how America got through the Great Depression. How did we get through World War II or the Civil War, both of which last almost 4 years? 4 years of not knowing, are we winning, are we losing? We are not quite 2 full months into this thing, and people want to know, when's it going to end, and how am I going to get back to normal?
But
who can tell you that?
in some ways where this is more difficult, maybe not economically, but there you had the freedom of movement. People from the West went to the big cities during the Dust Bowl component of it. There were bread lines, there were soup lines. Now, if you get on a line, you're risking your life. So it's
it's true.
now.
I also
Go
think,
ahead. Go ahead, the county exec,
go ahead.
please. People want to hear from
I was
you.
just going to say, well, no, I was just going to say, look, Bob, you and I are not far apart in age, and we've lived a fair number of years. We both want to live a lot more, but at this stage of the game, when you go this long in your life,
Yes.
you've never seen anything like this. That's a completely different experience. My mom was 19 when World War 18 when World War II broke out. Well, when Pearl Harbor happened, my mom was 18 years old, and she had been a Depression era kid from the day she was born. So, when we would get to the 1950s, and I would be a smart little kid around the house, or in the early 60s as I started to approach teenage years, she had already been through all kinds of difficulty in her early years, drop out of school and work in a factory and, the whole thing. And whereas with our generation, we have men who went to Vietnam, at a certain age in life, and we've had all kinds of other issues that people struggle through in their lives. But we haven't had a societal thing like this. So, I think it's, this is the test of our generation, and it came a little late for you and me. There are other people who are 18 right now. But we're accustomed to doing what we want. We're accustomed to coming and going and going out to dinner and watching movies if we feel like it. And all of a sudden, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And people are in the early stages of this. Their reaction to this stuff is, okay, I'll do this for a while, but let's see it get better. And so we'll see how it all plays out.
My guest, County Executive George Latimer, the latest regarding the coronavirus here in Westchester and beyond and its effect on our lives here. This is Radio Westchester. How is the Department of Social Services reacting to the fact we read in the press that there are more incidents of domestic violence, of violence, of child abuse? At least that's what we read. We know that the DA released 65 prisoners. What are you seeing at DSS and other departments, sir?
Well, the whole question of how this is affecting people psychologically is there. I've had Michael Orth interviewed twice on my Facebook program that we're doing 11 o'clock every day. And he says, do not underestimate, the mental health issues when people are cooped up for a long period of time. They don't expect to be there. Things get on, a more agitation framework, and violence has come out of that more than one might expect. And I think that becomes very difficult to deal with. There are helplines, there are resources out there, to deal with this. And then you add on with the DSS the poverty factor. There are a lot more people now that need financial help, and they're going to unemployment and so forth, and also applying for DSS benefits. And that has also created, financial instability that creates social instability. If you're not sure how you're going to eat or provide for your children, then it becomes that much more ramped up. And the problem too in our DSS system, like anything else, is that we can't interact with people face to face the way we used to. It's that you have an office structure. It's a very bureaucratic structure in that department. It's the largest department of county government. It's the largest part of county government that some people have no interaction with at all because they don't need any of those services. And then another portion of Westchester, it's their lifeline. And it's almost a big disconnect. You go into some of the suburban communities that are relatively well off. There are individuals on social services, but there's no real sense of what it means when you get to the poor neighborhoods. That DSS is the lifeline by which these folks survive, and being unable to meet them personally, assess things, go through the complications of application process, which difficult for average people to deal with. You can't throw a sheaf of papers at people and just say, okay, you fill these out, answer all these questions, and then let's go. So it is creating greater stress, greater mental stress.
County executive, you, as many others in your position, elected officials, you've got employees out there on the front lines, members of the health department, DSS, as we said, and others.
Yep.
They're out there on the front lines. One of the things that's becoming very clear, these people are real heroes. I mean, whether they be nurses, doctors, the county police, you really ought to be, well, I'm not telling you ought to be, but one must be proud of them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the definition of first responders has traditionally meant police and fire and then EMS. And I think now we have to include healthcare workers in that list of first responders. The nurses that are out there testing for COVID, if you think that a person potentially has the disease and you're going to test them, you take a swab up their nose to determine the culture, you're up close and personal with them. And if they sneeze or they're in now you may have on PPE, you may have on a gown and a mask and all that. But if you don't take those items off properly, don't get them on your hands and sanitize yourself, there's a very good chance you're going to get the disease by dint of working with people that have the disease. And we're dealing with that all the time now with our workforce, our nurses in the public health department and our medical professionals, and not just within the county government, but outside of that.
Oh, yeah.
We've had in some other departments, people working overtime that people don't realize. We have an emergency services department that serves as a clearinghouse for all orders from local governments and local organizations to get PPE. By the way, for people that don't know the acronym, that's personal protective equipment. That means masks, gloves, shields, gowns, stuff like that. That's what PPE is. And PPE, and also hand sanitizer, which, is absolutely going out of style. I mean, you're using hand sanitizer now. If you're smart, almost, you walk 3 steps, turn the doorknob, put on some hand sanitizer, because you don't know what's on the doorknob. The emergency services people are working overtime, trying to handle the orders, getting the material back from Albany, and then circulating it around to each of the different localities. It's really a massive task, and the police and the whole crew of them are working overtime. It's one interesting thing. You were around 10 years ago when Andy Spano ran and lost to Rob Astorino. At that point in time, there was a big movement to question, why do we need county government? Remember that?
Sure, I do. Absolutely.
The Guardian and every day other paper, county government is unnecessary and all that. I was already in Albany at the time, but I had served in county government previously, chairman of the board and all that. And, I'd look at this and I'd say it appeals to people's anger because they pay property taxes. And when they pay property taxes to the county, they don't see the direct relation. They don't know that the county takes their garbage after the local government picks it up and transfers it to the burn plant, or takes up their recycling. They don't know the county government has health department inspectors that go into every restaurant to make sure that the standards of cleanliness are being kept. And they don't see it, and so therefore they think it's a waste of money. They think it's duplicative. And I even send people off on Facebook like that. What they're really concerned about is they pay a lot in taxes, and they don't want to pay as much in taxes. On the other hand, they pay about 2/3 of every dollar they spend on schools. So, the nature of picking on the county is because they don't see the services. But this contagion makes the county services more understandable and more necessary because
Hmm.
you see that it's a county health department that's responding to this. You do not have a city health department or a town health department.
Hmm.
There is a state health department, but they're not staffed to come down and do all the things that have to be done. And maybe in a smaller state, a Connecticut, a Delaware, the state runs all of these programs from the state. But in New York State, they don't. That's where the county government plays its role. And not to defend government, but you defend the services. It's the services that happen. And when people say, well, I don't need those services, yeah, until there's a contagion.
You don't
And
need
then
them
all of
until
a
you need
sudden,
them.
you
Yeah.
need to have that infrastructure there.
It is 7:54. Our guest, County Executive here in Westchester, George Latimer. We're talking about the effects of the coronavirus, what is planned, etc. It's impossible to think about all this and not be concerned about money in people's pockets. We know that the some of the people who have a deposit agreement on their taxes started receiving payments as early as Saturday. You must be concerned, A, about the speed of those payments to Westchester residents, but also of the lack of income coming into the county.
Big problem. First of all, the first concern is for individuals. Before we start talking about organizations and entities, we talk about individuals. There's a large level of people that are unemployed. There are hourly workers in the service economy. And if you're not serving at restaurants, at bars, movie theaters, and nail salons, then you're not working, you're not earning a salary. There may be a handful of business people that can afford to continue to pay their workforce without revenue coming in, but the vast majority of these people are being laid off. They're not necessarily fired, but they're laid off while the businesses are closed. And at some point in time, move up the next notch, the small business owners not going to be able to stay afloat. So the money that's coming in from the federal government is essential to try to keep the lights burning and hopefully restart the economy. And when I hear the president say, "Well, once everything is over, we're going to start booming. We're going to boom," calm down. We're not going to boom. It's going to take time for us to reestablish where we were, on February 15th. And I know that was a wonderful narrative to have. What a great economy. Everything's great. Well, it's not great. It's not great right now. So let's just be honest with ourselves. It's going to take time to build this back in a much more substantial way. And that building back is going to take the federal government to be a partner in all of this stuff. They're not going to be able to sit on the sidelines and take sort of a laissez-faire attitude, what the governor's doing and all that stuff. The federal government's going to have to be directly involved in the incentivization to get our people back to work. As far as the government is concerned, we are in a financial freefall. We don't know how much revenue we're going to lose against our budget. Are we going to lose $50 million of revenue? Is this going to cost us $100 million of revenue? We don't know because we haven't stopped falling yet. Everything is still closed. It's been closed for the better part of a month, and it's going to stay closed for a while longer. And then we don't know when the engine restarts. So we've got a big budget gap at the county. This week, I'm going to announce the first phase of activities that I think will probably cut some spending, maybe in the vicinity of about $20 million, give or take. And that will help us deal with the first round of where we are. But if we face a cash shortfall, the towns and cities do, the villages, they're putting budgets together with no idea of how things are going to work out. And what really hurts is that I believe after the efforts we made last year, we put ourselves on a sound financial footing. We did things that would allow us to put money in our reserve fund. Well, now we got to go through the reserve fund.
Yeah, yeah.
People say, well, you're saving money for a rainy day. Guess what? It's pouring outside.
Yeah.
Literally, because it is. But figuratively, this is the surprise event that people don't anticipate, and that's why you have money in the bank. And in this case, that's why we have reserve funds. So unfortunately, where I was planning to go to Wall Street with a very rosy story at the end of the year saying, look at how we built ourselves back, increase our bond rating. Right now, all governments are going to be in deep trouble. The state's in deep trouble. Everybody is because we stopped the economy. We brought it to a full stop. And, that is not going to be easily resolved. But I don't want to focus on the government challenge. I've got to deal with the government challenge. But with the human beings, the individuals who are unemployed right now, they don't have time to worry about the government. So I have put before the Board of Legislators a proposal to delay the paying of county property taxes from April 30th to July 15th. When I say delay, what does it mean? If you can pay, but there's no penalty if you pay it later than April 30th, which is the usual due date, you get the bill April 1st or April 15th, scheduled to be paid by the
Understood.
end of the month. Now, if you're paying by a mortgage, escrow account, somewhere along the line, that's an automatic situation. And if you're a very wealthy person, and there are quite a few in this county, yes, it's hurt you, but you have enough money stored aside to be able to make a payment on your taxes. But there are people who are in the middle. They have moderate income, and they live paycheck to paycheck or a couple of paychecks deep. And so we hope that the stimulus will help them in the 75 days between April 30th to July 15th. Now, unfortunately, the Board of Legislators has not agreed with me. They have there's some town supervisors who have objected because they're worried about the town cash flow, and the towns collect the taxes and also the penalty fees, and they don't want to necessarily lose the penalty fees. And my argument has been, look, your revenue is hurt already by loss of sales tax and other things. The penalty fees on taxes doesn't mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to the people out there who are struggling to get by. And if we can forego penalty fees for 75 days, that's all we're doing when we make an April 30th date, a July 15th date. There'll be some cash flow issues, to be sure, but you're providing it to people because they have an economic hardship. And that's not everybody. Not everybody is unemployed. There are people who say, oh, my 401k took a hit. That's not the same as losing your job. If you lose your job, your spouse loses your job, that's an economic hardship. You should get the benefit of being able to pay your property taxes on July 15th, which, by the way, is the same day you have to file your federal and state taxes as well. So we'll see what happens. This just goes to show you, though, partisan affiliation is not the only thing that matters. Sometimes there is philosophy, and as much as you get criticized from time to time as people look at your party affiliation. I've always thought about these things. Well, we cut taxes last year. That's why, over the course of my prior career when I was board chairman, we cut taxes 3 years in a row. Property taxes are tough on people, and I think we should provide them that benefit.
Although it's also fair to say that had the county not been able to put the reserve fund at a higher level, that things would be worse now still. Do you have anything you want to say to the residents of Westchester before we send you on your way? And then I have something that may lighten your load a bit.
Okay. Well, yes. I mean, I think that we're going through difficult times. You and I are talking every week by week, and over the course of a week, things may not seem to change much, and it stretches this process out. I have confidence that we're going to get through this. I have confidence that even if it takes time, that we as Americans, we as Westchester people, have the stamina to see it through. But it will take stamina. It'll take reserves of will to wake up in the morning, hear bad news, but have confidence that we're going to get through it. No different than every day when Americans got up and they heard about the progress of the World War in Japan and Germany. Every day was not a day of success for the Americans. We lost battles and we lost men as we fought back. Ultimately, we won, but it took the better part of 4 years to do it. And I don't think this is going to take 4 years, but we have to steel ourselves and be mature about this.
Absolutely,
we're not going to get there overnight, and we're going to have pain. We're going to lose people we love. We ourselves may not make it through this individually, but collectively, we as a people will get through this. You have to know that inside of you in order to handle the day-to-day ups and downs and handle them and keep going.
Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. County Executive George Latimer just spent 25 minutes with us, and we really appreciate the time. So I've got to give you a minute back to lighten your load. Are you aware? Well, first of all, you're aware that Andy Spano has been a regular guest on this program for several years now, and he has become county executive, a very wise political analyst, but his sense of humor I was unaware of until we started talking as regularly as we do. Are you aware of the danger he has placed himself in with his own wife, sir? Probably not. Probably too busy, right?
No, probably not.
Okay. Well, he put a video together. I'm not talking out of school because this is all over the internet. Called Andy Makes a Mask. And in the video, you can check it out. I told him on the air, I said, you're not going to survive this. He cuts up his wife's underwear on YouTube and shows how you can make a mask out of undies, bras. And he says he can't use men's underwear because his nose goes through the opening. He is dead. He's anyway. I just thought that was his way of
Well,
light.
I don't think Andy's running for office again, so I think probably he's cleared the last bar that he has to clear.
No, but that's the least of
Andy
his
makes
problems.
no. Andy makes what? Andy makes a mask. Is
Yeah,
that what you're
go
telling me?
check it out on YouTube. Actually, I can forward it. I have it
Okay.
on my phone. It is hysterical, but he stretches his wife's undies, and I said, Andy, you could fit that thing on a barbecue grill. You're gonna, she's gonna kill you. But it is quite humorous and just a little bit to lighten
It
your
does
load.
make you wonder what I'm going to do. It does make you wonder what I'm going to do in my post-county
Yeah,
executive years.
15 years from
Obviously, we know
now.
that Rob Astorino may run again, and he's out there on CNN defending President Trump. So now we know what Andy's up to, and I guess I got to figure out what my post-CE years are going to look like.
I will forward it to you, and it is hysterical.
Okay.
And God bless him. Listen, thank you
Okay.
very much. Keep doing the job you're
Thank you,
doing. I know
Bob.
the
Have a
county
great day.
appreciates it. Take care. County Executive
Bye-bye.
George Latimer. It is 8:04. And we enter the third hour of our program. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. This is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. We are not there, and we have conformed to the stay-at-home order. We are broadcasting remotely. No need to keep going back and forth or to the train station. It's empty anyway, by the way. But more importantly, for the sake of the health of our families, and quite frankly, myself and others, we are broadcasting remotely. It is 8:05. It is Monday, April 13th, 2020. Mornings with Bob Marrone. Again, the name of the show. I am Bob Marrone. It is 42 degrees, going to get up to the 60s today, and it is overcast. And we'll share the weather with you now. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by our friends at United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org. Again, overcast, but the winds are whipping up. Expect showers and high winds throughout the day, gusting from 50 to 60 miles an hour. Risk of downed trees and power lines is there. Also, there may be some thunderstorms, and you heard the county executive before. There may be a temporary closure of the Glen Island test site and others, but you may want to listen in on westchester.gov, his web report at 11 o'clock, and he'll give an update on that. That is the county executive will, on how long those sites will stay closed. Tonight, cloudy, breezy, scattered showers, 43 degrees. Moving into Tuesday now, a mixture of sun and clouds, 55 during the day, at night getting down to 38. Keep your blankets. Wednesday, mostly cloudy, scattered showers, 46. At night, 35. And on Thursday, same thing. Sunny, though, mostly sunny, 51 degrees, but at night getting down once again to 35 degrees. And that is the weather on this Monday, April 13th, 2020. Again, if you've got lawn furniture, if you put it out already, and many of you have, because after all, what else could you do on some of these nice weekends and days? Have a barbecue, whatever. You may want to batten that down for the day or pull in the furniture. Let's go over some of the sponsors for this hour. Pluginvirtualreality.com, Dominic's Fine Cigars, the law firm of Pena and Com, Aging Issues Management. In fact, we're going to talk with the CEO in about 12 minutes time. He has been taking calls and helping people, myself included, on how to apply for certain of the federal grants for small businesses and medium-sized businesses. We will go through that with him at 8:20. And again, his business also involved in helping you plan for your financial future, whether it be any number of different lifestyles that you will go through and or choose, from still being able to do lots of different things. How much money will you need? Or if you finally need some sort of senior housing and then assisted living, or perhaps even a nursing home, how do you negotiate those different eras, those different stages? That is his, that's why he calls it Aging Issues Management. His program, Aging Issues Radio, also heard on our air and podcasted on his website regularly, Aging Issues Radio. Again, he will be with us at 8:20. And of course, and you know, I always go on and on about this because I really like the food there. I like the food at other places, and I'll mention that because you should try and patronize them. Of course, we are proud to be sponsored by and talk about the Beachmont Tavern, right across the street from my owner, next to the Firehouse on North Avenue. They're open. What makes them a little different, besides the fact that they're a tavern and you can get a bubbly when you order, because they're a tavern, they're open late. They open at 11:30 in the morning, but they are open till 1 a.m. So it's 11 o'clock. You've been sleeping late because you're not working and you're home. And so you get up at maybe 10 or 11, and well, good, because at 11:30 is when they open. But my point is, you're up later than usual. You're watching a late movie, you're playing cards with the kids, the brother-in-law, the wife, whoever is sequestered in the house with you, and you're hungry. Well, call the Beachmont Tavern, and they can send over just about, they have a very terrific menu. You can, I sound like the president, they have an enormous, exceptional menu. It's phenomenal. Actually, they do. My favorite, as you know, is the burger with sauteed onions. Don't need the lettuce, don't need the tomato. Keep the cheese. Just give me my sauteed onions, ketchup, a pickle on the side, a little salad, or French fries. I'm good to go. And if you call them up, as I have done, you can go and pick up the bag, or they will send it to you. And the way they've set it up, you walk in the door. There's a series of tables there. You can't actually go in the tavern anymore proper, but you can go right in and look at the bar and say, "Gee, I wish I was watching the ball game," but you can't. But you can pick up the food or order it there, or call in and they will deliver it. Here's the phone number. Write it down. Get a pen, get a pencil, get a chisel. 636-9533. 636-9533. And the food is terrific. Please, folks, give them a call. You won't be sorry. I've got a couple of favorite restaurants, but I'm going to mention a bunch of them. Just so, and they're not sponsors, but I've got, I want them to do well because I want them to be there when I am, when this is all over. My favorite, I make no bones about it when it comes to Italian food, is Marrone. You can go, they have, not out on North Avenue, but they'll have a sign there. If you go behind the store, they have a wonderful takeout. And for the first time since when they were down, or further downtown, or further, I should say, to the west, you can even get pizza by the slice there now. But they're still doing good business. At least it's not the business they have, but the pizza's good. They will deliver it. It arrives, and you just want to, hug the box like a lover just walked into your life. They've got everything. Chicken palm heroes. You can get a full dinner. You can order the full dinner and pick it up from our friends at Modern. Posto's, another great restaurant that's available to you. Caramandel, the Indian restaurant, and there's so many more. If you have a favorite restaurant, call them up, help them out, help them get through this so that they will be there when this is all over. Oh, and I just thought of the chicken wings and the boneless chicken wings and all that other stuff. By the way, you know what I can't figure out about the Beachmont? This is not to knock taverns, because tavern, bar food is good, depending on if they have a restaurant thing or not. Particularly after you've had a few snookers, you don't really care how good or bad it is. But they have, I can't figure out why, the freshest salads. Usually you'd say, people don't go to a bar and buy salad. They eat a burger, you chomp in, and the mayo goes, I mean, not the mayo, mayo on a burger. The ketchup goes everywhere, the lettuce falls down. But you're picking on French fries, you're yelling at the team, the game on TV. However, they have fresh salad. It's crispy. So if you get the burger and the salad, you could do worse. All right, let's get back to business. This is the one, the only Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station, of which we are not today, won't be for a while now. We are following the rules and the new customs of remote broadcasting. Let's take a look at who's coming up. We're going to open the phones up for a little bit here and see what's on your mind. 914-222-3141, 222-3141. We can get a couple of calls in. We certainly have a lot to talk about and hope you do too. And we will then at 7:20 talk with Joe Soroselli, Tom Avenante at 7:50, and then, of course, our long-form interview with Bob Cox at 9:05. Now, on the plus side, I mentioned it when George Latimer was on the phone with us. For those of you who filed taxes and when you knew you had a refund coming, if you requested direct deposit, some of you will get your checks as early as today, and some of you may have even gotten them Saturday, although I don't know, that's when the checks started to go out. But again, we're talking about electronically. So theoretically, the check amount, that check should arrive, or that payment should arrive as quickly as my voice is now to your ears. So those stimulus payments will begin hitting bank accounts. Now, for those of you, myself included, who get a check, those checks have not gone out yet. Over the next couple of weeks, they will, and they will be scaled, which is to say, those of us with the least income will get them first, and so on. And then last will be those people that, for whatever reason, didn't file in 2018 or 2019. You will still get checks, but they will arrive perhaps not for several weeks. So you need to be aware of that. And also, if you have a small business, you want to stay tuned. In 5 minutes, we'll be talking with Joe Soroselli. He's going to tell you how to apply for those benefits. Oh, God, so much of this today. Okay. We don't know on a county level, or rather a state level, I should say, whether the schools will be open back in May. Likely not. But the question is, will they be open at all before the school year ends? Now, New York City has already made a decision that their schools will not. And the way the state is structured, I believe that they have the authority to overrule the governor in that sense. The governor has not made up his mind yet. Now, the governor has also said, in terms of preparing for the return to work, and the return to normalcy, that it's almost likely to be done in stages, but it will almost certainly have to be done in cooperation with New Jersey and Connecticut. And it may be done by region. It may be done even by city or county or whatever. They've got to look at the virus and look at it, pardon me, carefully. Some of the things that really popped up in the news this morning, the mental health lines, the traffic is up almost 900%, specifically 891%. That is an incredible number, and something you need to be aware of. Number two, the incidence of domestic violence and child abuse are up as well, much owing to the closed quarters that people are living in, and likely the higher stress of people not having jobs or money. Now, the president's in a tough spot, and I know we all have our opinions of the president and some of the things he does or might do. Mine right now is I hope he doesn't fire Fauci. But all that said, where we need to have a certain reverence for the position that he is in, no matter what decision he makes to open up the economy, whenever he does it, he will have detractors. He will have supporters. Whenever he does it, people are going to die one way or another, whether more people die from the virus or people die or have their lives ruined by economic damage. It is not going to be an easy decision. He has said it is the toughest decision that he will ever make. And really, we are going to have to separate his propensity to be dramatic and to focus on himself. He does do those things, and they're not attractive. But on the other hand, the man inside that set of externals that he throws out I'm not going to be one of those who says he doesn't care because I don't believe that. He, regardless of how he spins his yarn, it will be the most important decision of his presidency that, quite frankly, none of us would want to make. And that's what we elect these people to do. So give him, again, criticize him if he fires Fauci. I hope he doesn't do that. You may criticize his process if he doesn't listen. But let's assume he will. And let's, as one country, try and understand the decision that he makes and why he makes it and understand how tough it is. I mean, if it's for some reason egregiously too long, or if he waits too long or he does it too soon, then we're all entitled to our opinions. But understand this is a monumental decision, even greater in some ways than when a president sends people to war, which generally always has support. Not always, but generally does. Something else that's very important, and I want to cover it in this last minute before we talk with Joe Sorcelli. If you suffer from allergies, the advice being given right now, since the allergy season is upon us, is please treat it prophylactically. Please, if you suffer from allergies and you take things like Zyrtec or Allegra or whatever is the medication that you take, or you have an inhaler, make sure you do it every day. Minimize allergies, because the immune response, which is what an allergy is, it's an immune response to the allergens, creates the kind of inflammation that makes it easier for virus to cling to those inflamed cells, and can exacerbate or even introduce the virus, whereas it might be less inclined to do so. Also, avoid allergens. If you have a cat and you're allergic to the cat, maybe you want to keep the cat in another room right now. But again, make sure you take your medications and or your inhalers. Take that medication, take it prophylactically. And we have our caller coming in, and we have just locked him in. So please, if you have allergies, please. They're telling us now that it could create, again, it's not one of those things, if you have allergies, you're going to get the virus, but it adds another, if you will, another factor that makes you just a little more prone, because of the immune system response and the inflammation, to have the virus visit you. It is 8:20, and it's time for our next guest. Now, Joe Sorcelli, we've done a show together back on WVOX. We did one on WFAS. He has been doing his own show, sometimes with me, sometimes without, here on Radio Westchester. He's the president, if you will, the chief executive officer of Aging Issues Management. He has a wonderful website, Aging Issues Management, of course, a part of it, Aging Issues Radio. He's done some podcasts. He posts those podcasts there. Very interesting man. He's run for office up where he lives, very involved in his community, and he's been dealing in financial matters and been a financial professional for many years. I like to tell him that I like his products better than he does, and I wouldn't say sells them. He sells his services. Aging Issues Management is all about that. How will you plan for your future and the different levels of your future? For example, as you look toward retirement, we have something he calls the go-go years, where you're going out skiing or you're traveling the world, and you're still well enough to do all that, and hopefully you've planned economically for it. And then maybe a little later on, it's time to downsize and move to senior housing or something smaller, or perhaps the next step where you want assisted living. And have you planned for that? What are the economics of it? What types of insurances do you have? And then on into perhaps at some point you need a nursing home. Do you have enough to support that? Do you require Medicaid? These are all questions. I lay out the questions just to give you an idea of what his business does. He's a fun guy. He just experienced his birthday. But one of the things he's added, an arrow he's added to his quiver, and he's helped me with this, given that he worries about financial issues and futures. He got very involved in understanding how to apply for the different federal monies that are available to small businesses and others. So without further ado, I wanted to cover all that. See, now he knows I've been listening when we do programs together. Please welcome the Chief Executive of Aging Issues Management, Joe Soroselli. Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, Bob. All
I-
right.
I
So
thought-
how are you doing on this rainy Monday morning?
Actually pretty well. I thought I did a pretty good overview of what you do. Wasn't bad, huh? I've been listening, Pop.
I know. I was wondering if you were going to let me, get a word in, but I don't have to describe what I do for a living.
No, but it's not your job. That's called a setup in the biz. You know that actually. And see, the problem is that if you do it, it sounds like braggadocio. If I do it, they know I've benefited from it, and I've, as you know, referred you to friends and family, which is not something you normally do if someone isn't good at what they do. So I'm done being nice. Now we need your help. What's out there, Joe? What services are available, and how do we apply for them?
Let's for everybody that's listening, there are different people that have interest in different programs. And let's break it down to three different things. All right. One, which a lot of people are interested in because unfortunately they may have been laid
Hello.
or
Later.
I'll say this, or a contractor, an independent contractor that all their business dried up. I mean, a lot of restaurants don't have payroll. A lot of, Uber drivers don't have payroll, but they don't have any work right now because nobody's leaving their house. So there is that unemployment that we hear about and the supplemental unemployment, all right? Then you go into the, everybody's expecting a check. Government sending everybody $1,200 and, or $2,400 for a household and an additional $500 per child under the age of 17. Well, the first thing that you have to understand, they're not just flying off the shelves, the checks. And the other thing is that it is not everybody. There are income limits on who is eligible to receive the checks. Nobody's really talked about it, right? But, when you're on the, when you're in this metropolitan area, or a Westchester resident, it is there's a high probability that your household income or your personal income exceeds the criteria that allows you to receive a check. It isn't everyone. There are income criteria, and some people don't understand that. And then there are additional criteria that, yes, you needed to have filed your 18 tax return. You need to, at least your 18, potentially your 19 tax return. And if that 18 tax return for a family, for a household, exceeds the $198,000, all right, the likelihood is you're not eligible for a check. So if you filed a joint tax return and you had a $198,000 income, right, there's a strong chance that there's no check coming. Right?
That's correct.
And a lot of people don't realize that. Yes, the wider,
Go ahead.
party of the population will, a check if they met the criteria, if they had, filed their taxes electronically and they received their refund through, their bank account, they may start seeing it this week. Right?
Well, we saw it may come as
that's-
early. It might have come as early as Saturday, but if you have automatic deposit, it's coming this week or next week for sure. Checks, not so much.
Well, yeah, and that's for the wide variety, of individuals. So that's that first piece that a lot of individuals are curious about. And I actually had a conversation with a client that was very interesting. And what I mean by that is he was like, I don't need the money. Why are they sending it to me?
Really?
And this, well, let's take the
Well, because one of the
demographics,
things
the
that
retirees.
person, Joe, am I wrong in saying that person needs to understand that, but that is part of also to stimulate the economy, not just to bail out people. It's also so that it will be spent. He should go out and buy a bike with it or something.
Jesus, you do listen, and that was the explanation, right? I'm not going to, and I know we sometimes talk politics, but staunch Republican, why is the government going into so much more debt, so forth and so on, and all the other things that are out there. But I explained to him, I said, well, if you don't, in quotes, need the money, give it to somebody that does, right? And then the answer, the first answer was, well, what are you going to do with it? Right? That was, my first, right? And he says, well, I'm going to put it in the bank. I said, all right, then you really don't want to do it, and it's not going to be used for what it was supposed to be used for. All right? I said, but let's look at, do you have a daughter, a son, a grandchild, someone that, might need this money at this time? And the answer was, I sent my daughter a check for $5,000 last week. I said, well, you just got back $2,400 of it, right? And maybe you want to send this $2,400 in addition to the
Joe,
$5,000.
yeah, have you considered giving this person my address? If they want, I'll take their money from them. My guest is Joe Soroselli, the Chief Executive Officer of Aging Issues Management, and we're going over the different payments available from the federal government, where they fit, where they don't, et cetera. Continue, Joseph, please.
And again, the very first one that we were starting, I wanted to talk about was this most prevalent, situation of these stimulus checks going out to everyone.
You know what I did
If
want to
you
get
haven't
to?
filed-
If I may, I want
Okay.
you to cover that, but next to get to these laid off people who don't have, who maybe aren't on real payrolls. But anyway, continue, please.
That is the next piece. But just, what's our time frame, Bob, so I know how to lay it
I've
out?
given you right through 9 o'clock if necessary. Mr.
Okay, so
Abernathy
we
may or may
can-
not call in, so go ahead.
Yeah, then we can have a nice conversation on that.
This
But
is obviously very important to people.
Let's stay with the stimulus check, because that same person that may be unemployed or anything else may be looking for that money right now. Okay? And, it may not get to them yesterday or today or this week. And a lot has to do with, how you filed your taxes, how much money you made, so forth and so on. So the first thing that I want to make sure everybody understands is the government is looking at their records. A lot of people think it's free money, everybody's going to get the check. Well, no. Right? There were, I watched the news, I watched and this is getting a little political, but it was, as I said, it's a pretty stupid question. It was a pretty stupid question raised by a reporter. And she basically said, what about all the people that don't file taxes and, aren't here legally, right? Will they get their checks? And I had to sit back and say, this was posed at a presidential conference. I said, that's what makes the systems ripe for fraud, right? Because it isn't just we're sending out money to every person in the United States. No, right? You have to have had filed taxes. If you didn't file your 17, it basically even stipulates in the guidelines. If you have not filed your 18 taxes, you can file your 18 taxes, and if money's still available, they will send out the check. I mean, that's the debate right now, with between in the houses of Congress, between, we need to fund more programs, right? And, one side of Congress wants to fund one that's running out of money probably this week. The other wants to fund all of them. It's sort of like, take them one at a time, guys. Just let's do some good. Let's not try to do everything in one shot. And in this particular case, it's the same thing. If you don't get this check right away, there are options. Now, the interesting piece is, right, it does open up for the person who doesn't have to file taxes. There is a whole website that you can go on that if you have income, of, $12,000, you don't have to, you don't file taxes. You don't have to file taxes legally. So therefore,
So what do
why
they
would the
do?
government have records?
What do they do,
Records.
Joe?
Well,
How do they do it?
oh, that individual, that person who's on a very low Social Security or something like that, right? There is a website that you can go on and register. And unfortunately, it's a website. I don't know of anything else, but there is a website that you can go on and register, and they will eventually mail you a check out. I will assume, right? As long as you meet all the other eligibility requirements, right? They will mail you a check. So it's not that they're leaving people out of the system, but they do want to, have something on record of what's going, of who you are, how much money you make. Do you really need the money? Hence, the $198,000, right? This is all important. Now, the actual, and I use the number of 198, is actually starts less. To get a full $1,200, right? All right, you only can make less than $75,000. Right, and then it's $5 for every $100 you make. They deduct $5 for every $100, right? You make over it. So around, in simple numbers, it comes out if you make $99,000, right? You're not eligible for a check. So if you make $80,000, you're gonna get $1,100 approximately, right? So forth and so on. So there are eligibility criteria. So it's not just everybody's getting this check.
Well, and there was a piece, Joe, in the New York Daily News today that some immigrants aren't getting checks, and I think it has to do with you may have a Social Security card and you may have income, but if you didn't file, you're not getting the money.
We just covered that.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying that, but
Yes,
people
sir.
will read that. But people will read that article and wonder why not. Again, Joe Soroselli is with us. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Aging Issues. Now, what about those laid off folks, those contractors?
All right, I'm going to talk about that, but I just want to close this subject. So let's really think about this. If you filed your 2018 tax return, and your income was your individual income was less than $99,000, and they have a bank account linked to your tax return, right? Or if you filed jointly and your income was less than $198,000 and you have a bank account linked to your tax return, you're going to see some money, in the near future. So that's the close, right? If you haven't filed tax returns there, and you meet this criteria, you will, you can go on to a website and potentially register. Now, the argument, and I'm going to say this is from one side of the political aisle, the argument is, well, then we're giving these people all the opportunities to turn around, the government the opportunity to audit their returns. Because if I've never filed taxes and I say I make $60,000, right? They have my Social Security number and a statement from me that I make $60,000. How come I didn't pay taxes? It's a way of the government getting information.
Interesting.
Realistically, we can't get it both ways.
Well, before we move on to the next, I have to take a quick break, Joseph. So stay right there. Joe Soroselli is with us, and we're going to come right back to the ways that you can apply for the money. But our break this particular time is dedicated to something that's going on here in New Rochelle. And our friends at the Rotary Club of New Rochelle, they're organizing a fundraiser, a GoFundMe page on behalf of the New Rochelle Rotary Club Foundation. Now, your donations are 100% tax deductible. As the New Rochelle area has been greatly impacted by COVID-19, the Rotary Club of New Rochelle is looking to raise money to help those in need. They will be given back to the New Rochelle community and those in the Sound Shore area affected. And so far, they've already got 11 people and $1,500 or something like that. More than that, actually, a couple of $1,000 already. Again, please go to the GoFundMe page. $2,275 already. $100,000 is the goal. So please go to GoFundMe.com, Rotary Club of New Rochelle, COVID-19 Relief Fund. Alrighty, and we return now to our conversation with Joe Soroselli. Joe is the chief executive officer of Aging Issues Management. He also has several radio programs, Aging Issues Radio, and he's been advising people, including this broadcaster, how to take advantage of the needed funds coming from the federal government. Welcome back, Joseph.
All right. Well, I in preparation for this morning, broke out the stimulus relief, right, or the government relief that we have available into the 3 different sections. The one we just covered was really what most people are thinking about right now because they're looking at these checks that will be coming in the mail, and these are gifts. They are, or when I say they are stimulus checks. They are not repayable. They are not loans. They're not anything else. The second area that, a lot of individuals, and this is what you were asking earlier, is my income stream has dried up. Now, I use that word income stream has dried up because you could have been working for somebody on payroll and you were laid off, right? Or you may have been furloughed, or you may have taken a reduction, which is not an uncommon situation right now because employers do want to keep their employees. It's not that easy to, ramp back up when this does end. And it will end. I mean, I think everybody agrees it will end. Will it be the same as it may have been? Probably not. But, the severity of the shutdown is going to end at some point. So now we have this period of time. It may have started in March. It may have started in April. It may not start until May. That whoever I'm receiving my money from, if it's an employer, right, I may not be getting any money in. So I'm unemployed. The second piece, that people historically have not been eligible for are the 1099 contractors because they're not on payroll. There are no payroll taxes. There are no unemployment taxes being collected on a weekly basis or on a biweekly basis.
That's correct.
Out of a person's payroll.
What do they
everybody
do?
sits back and says, what do they do? Well, the supplemental program that the government has introduced in this situation has a very specific line that stipulates that, these individuals are eligible. This is important, right? 1099 people can be eligible. Now, is it an automatic? Is it just go into the get file for unemployment and get it? It's not like you're going to go on a website, government website, and sit back and explain that hey, I don't have this income anymore. There are criteria the government looks at. And let's make believe you're a W-2 employee and you are a high income earner. And your state benefit is $500, right? The government has an extra $600 they could potentially be giving you.
They can.
As a supplemental.
All right, but still,
Right,
I'm not understanding how this person applies. What does the 1099 person do?
Okay. The first thing that you have to understand, that people have to realize, is the actual federal government is not administering the program. They are supplementing the program. So and I had to walk an individual through this very, very specific, very, very specific situation. And I said, okay, we have to file an unemployment claim with New York State. I'm not going to tell you other states. I'm familiar with New York State, but I'll assume everybody is working in a similar fashion. All right. So the first thing you have to do is you have to file the unemployment claim.
Okay, but if you
Similar,
don't, but if you've got a 1099 or you're on the payroll of someone else, yikes.
No, don't. You just gave the yikes. It's not that. I want to simplify
Well, no,
things.
I know. That's what I want you to do. That's
You,
why I said yikes.
you, yeah. So you have to file the unemployment claim. So you go onto the New York State website. Interestingly enough, if anybody has done it, is it only accepts by your last name on certain days. I forget exactly. It's 3 days of the week. It's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I believe. And it's like certain letters of the alphabet are good on Monday, certain on Tuesday, certain on Wednesday. And you're going to go through the traditional unemployment application online. Okay, there is a little checkoff box that says COVID-19, 19 stimulus package, supplemental plan, right on the top. But you get to that after you put in all of your information. They want to know who you are. You are, and I'm going to use, I can always use, you are Joe Soroselli, your social security number is dot, 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 date of birth is dot, 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 right? Here's, who are you working for? Well, Joe Soroselli Inc., right? How much
All right, I want you to
making, so
freeze it
forth.
right there. Hold on a second. Just a question. What if you're self-employed? Can you still, or if you run a company, such as I do, for example? Now, I can apply for funds, certainly, that we'll get to, like the payroll thing. But can I, and by the way, I just banged my mic and it's stopped the sound from going out. If I'm self-employed or I run a small business, can I file an unemployment claim?
Well, unemployment, this is the other criteria. Now, what you just mentioned, if I'm self-employed, all right, and I am going to apply, when you start the application, there's criteria that lay it out. One of the things is self-employed. But it just doesn't turn off and say you're not eligible anymore. You still there, Bob?
Yes, I am. I'm listening carefully. No, I'm listening carefully.
That's okay. Now I wasn't certain. You got so nice and quiet for a minute, right? Unusual. But when you check off that box for self-employed or sole proprietor with different, you'll see. And I could open the site up and look at it and give you all the criteria. But basically, it's that independent contractor, and one of them is an independent contractor, right? You'll go through the application. And then comes the next piece, the supplemental piece. And what that supplemental piece will do is, because if you checked off box A, you're going to go through all the traditional boxes that everybody else goes through, which is pretty much identifying who you are, so, tax IDs, all the other stuff, right? And then you're going to come to the supplemental part. And now that part of the questionnaire is it a family-owned business? Is it not a family-owned business? Who else in the family is working for it? A lot of additional questions are going to be asked about what's going on. And you're going to answer all of those questions. Now, here is the biggest part of the Social Security that people, unemployment that people don't fully understand, is if you work 1 day a week, say, let's make believe you're working 1 day a week. It's going to ask you how much income you made, so forth and so on, in that 1 day of the week. And they'll deduct a certain percentage of your benefits, at the end of that week. And it is a weekly reporting. It is not it is not just sign up and receive your checks. Because what unemployment insurance is designed to do is provide income to individuals that are available to work now. So right now, Bob, you're not available to work. You're on the radio.
That's correct.
Okay. Right? Your income may have been affected because of everything that's here or going on, right? But you're working, you're just not making any money, unfortunately.
Right.
So are you available for work? And if unemployment called you up and said, Bob, I've got a radio broadcasting job at ABC Network or whatever it may be, I want you to go interview for it, and you looks like you're eligible for it, you got to be available to go for that interview and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a gift. And then the other part is, if you have some income, they're asking you to, they're going to ask you to disclose it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have, if you have, and the types of income are labeled too. So you may have some rental income. God bless. Maybe somebody owns a building and rents an apartment. You could have some rental income. You could have some residual income from somewhere else. Investment income is not considered, investment income is not what they're looking for. They're looking for, income from some form of business. Because if you are a landlord, you may have to spend a day or two a month at the, managing the property. And that's what they're looking for. Because you may not be fully available. Everybody says, oh, I do that at night. Well, that just means you had a night job. Right? So I'm not trying to downplay it, because it is a great program, and it is giving people per se a livable wage all of a sudden, and for the individuals that are self-employed, right, sole proprietors, so forth and so on, that have not got payroll taxes, because part of part A of the application online is who's your employer and what's the tax ID. Well, there isn't one. So
Okay,
when you go through,
Joe, in the interest of time,
right,
I'd like to move out of the 1099 and go into the emergency $10,000 one if we can. We've only got 11 minutes left.
I'm looking at. Fortunately, I have the clock ticking down, and I was going to close it off. So what simply put, make the application. The worst case scenario is you're going to get a phone call from the unemployment and say, we want a little bit more information. Best case scenario, you may see a check coming, may see a check appear in your mail, in your checking account, however it may be. But I often tell people is nothing ventured, nothing gained. So if you think you're eligible for unemployment, definitely apply for it. Now let's go to the third area, of the Stimulus Act. And the $10,000 check, Bob, is not, just carte blanche. There are really two parts of that particular program. The $10,000 has always been available. It's now a little bit more because they, a little bit different criteria, because they extended the reasons for being eligible. The $10,000 and above, it's not just flat $10,000. It's the $10,000 and more. Right? And what it was always designed around is an emergency relief. That's what it falls under. So previously it used to be for forest fires, floods, natural disasters, something of that nature.
One of the things about this is taking a very, not you, this is taking a very long, it's supposed to be emergency money. No one's got anything yet.
Well, that's because it's not a grant. Everybody thinks it's free money.
No, I understand, but
not.
what's the criteria?
The criteria is you do have to have the ability theoretically to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to answer some questions, and you're going to have to go through a banker, right? So if you don't have a relationship with a banker, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to, process the paperwork. Because the loan is being made from a bank. It's not being made from the government. It's not a government check. It's an SBA check through a bank. And what that $10,000 actually is an advance on a future loan. It's an emergency advance. That's what that $10,000 is. So it's not free money. Now, is it potentially going to be forgivable? The answer is yes. But again, it's not guaranteed to be forgivable.
Why would they, on one hand, say you need the ability to pay it back, but it might be forgivable? It seems to me to be that's counterindicative. I mean, if a business is losing money because they don't have money coming in, Joseph, they may demonstrate that they can't pay it back anytime soon.
Well, we're not talking about anytime soon.
Okay, continue.
Everything starts to accrue within a year, right? You have an advantageous interest rate, potentially 3.75, and you can pay it back over 30 years. So
Okay.
what you're telling me, Bob, your answer right now is, yeah, I'm a business in trouble right now. I'm in an emergency situation. I need the money. The plan is designed to get you the money today. But they're still going to look at who you are and say, okay, am I just giving this guy $10,000 for, and he's not going to be in business in a year from now, right? And that's really a part of the criteria is, will that company be there 10 years, a year from now, right? And if they are going to be there here a year from now, hopefully they'll have the ability to repay. And this is where that little ambiguity comes in, is will it become a grant? I'm not going to tell you I have all the details, but what you have to understand that by the law, this $10,000, quick $10,000 is an advance on an SBA loan.
Okay. How quickly should we be hearing from these people?
That's a totally different subject. Right? That's a totally different subject. If you have no relationship with a banker, with a bank,
Although this seems
Right.
to be, this is confusing me, because when I know I applied, for example, for that 10, I'll give you an example. They didn't
okay,
ask about a
I'm gonna-
relationship.
I'm going to ask.
Hold on, but bear with me
Let me-
here.
let me-
As opposed to the
All right.
the one that is a payroll replacement or payroll a second one where you need
Payroll Protection Act.
yeah, that one you go straight through your bank to do, but the other one was an SBA form, if I'm not mistaken. The emergency
Yeah, but
10.
again,
So
yeah,
are
but-
they going to turn it over to a bank?
yeah, that's the issue.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
That's the issue that people don't understand, is the application online is a joke. Right? I'm going to be upfront with you. It's everybody and their uncle looks like they could do it. You go online, you go into the $10,000 piece. It's 2 pages. It's got next to no information. It asks for next to no information, but it has a lot of disclosure. We'll be in touch. We'll be looking for information, and where are they going to get this information from? And then the last thing is, okay, where do we send the money? And everybody's saying, how come I haven't got my check yet? It's a consistent scenario, right? Because it is not a gift. It's
Well,
not
of course not.
free money.
But something with the word
Right.
emergency ought to be timely, either in its refutation or its delivery, so
Well,
people can look for other
unfortunately-
sources.
Well, that's the key to this whole scenario, is you do have to look. We're coming up, but that's the key that people have to understand. And again, driving home, the actual $10,000 is an advance against an SBA loan. It's not a gift, a grant. It's just
Right.
not flat money.
Okay.
That's the first question. So if you don't think you're going to be, if you are not in a position where you may be able to repay it, that's it. It was designed around natural disasters, temporary situations, so forth and so on, to get money out. So and I'm going to use this because it just, there were some businesses that were affected in the Midwest from tornadoes over the weekend. Okay, saw some destruction. Will they come back? Will they not come back? We'll see. But the likelihood is most people try to rebuild and bring their businesses back. That's what that $10,000 was. If you plan on being in business a year from now, we want to help you through an emergency $10,000. We'll then do others. And here's the part that nobody realizes. Hey, you need more money, and you have the ability to pay back more money. More money's available.
Got it.
More money's available.
So much
And
for the
that's what,
emergency fund. All right, before you go, we got 4 minutes left. The payroll replacement one.
Hey.
What is that called?
Okay, Payroll Protection Act, right? Again, a loan, lots of criterias, but it is a loan. It is a loan. I keep on emphasizing to people, this is a loan, right? The payroll portion is documented to be forgivable if you meet criteria. So if you had a payroll, I'm going to use simple numbers. You had a payroll of $10,000 in January, right? Unfortunately, you had no cash. They didn't give you the $10,000 in March to pay April's payroll. You laid them off. You rehire that individual. You bring them back at the $10,000. They're going to be looking at payroll records from 2019, 2020, and the end of the year. So if you applied for a payroll loan based upon the $10,000, and in December you only have a payroll of $5,000, it is likely that you will only get back the $5,000 as a waive, and they keep on focusing on 75%. So I tell people that seems to be the magic number. I don't know the ultimate piece because it is a loan and there are criteria. What the ultimate criteria will be, I can never say because they rushed these acts through, through Congress.
How do you
And,
apply for this one? Where do you go for this one to apply?
Banks, the banks,
Straight to the bank.
the banks.
This one you don't even go to the SBA. You go to the bank. Is that correct?
Go to the bank, right? Because again, what they are consistently looking at, is it an existing business, right? And hopefully you have a payroll, you've been using a payroll provider that can provide, payroll records.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot out there. This particular payroll protection program, this is the one that they were trying to do the do a supplemental budget for $250 billion for last week that got declined in the Congress because apparently it's, there's been so many applications through banks, not individually, through banks, right? And approved loans. So ABC company, IBM, I'm going to say, but, ABC contractor, or the best things. I saw a couple of food deliveries in New York, and I know we're in New York, like Baldor. They're getting it. They're hiring people. Their business is down, but they kept people on payroll. So they were eligible for it, and they likely will get it, and they'll get that check. But this is the way it works. So I got less than 2 minutes. Simply put, 3 programs. One is the stimulus. That's that $1,200 or $2,400, right? You got to be eligible. There are criteria for it that you have to be aware. You can go onto the website. It will give it to you. But basically, if you make over $198,000 in the household, you're not getting a check. Second thing is unemployment. There is a supplemental benefit from the above and beyond the New York State benefit of $600, so that if you were making a higher income, you'll have supplemental payments. In addition, the supplemental payments can be, you can be eligible for a sole proprietor, a 1099, an independent contractor can apply. But in both cases, you have to go through the New York State unemployment application. And then the final piece is the payroll protection money, the PPE money. That is done through the banks. Right, and I overlooked one that everybody's interested in. Hey, I can get $10,000 for free. No, that is an emergency disaster loan, right? And it's an advance, and it has to be looked at as you will be in business a year from now. It is not a grant. Right?
Okay.
Could it be waived? The answer is yes.
Joseph, thank you.
That brought us right up to 8:59.
How? No, it's where we are going. Yeah, you made it. You made it right to the end,
Okay,
Joseph.
I'm gonna close. I got to do the close.
How can people get a hold of you?
And
Go
again,
ahead.
if you have any questions, you can reach Joe Soroselli at 914-468-0186. Working from my office at home, and somewhat quarantined, but fortunately very healthy, and 1 year older.
And a happy
Listen, Bob,
birthday
thank
to
you
you.
very much
Give,
for the
whoa,
time.
whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't go. Give me the phone number and the website again.
Okay, phone number 914-468-0186, and the website is agingissuesmanagement.com.
Joseph,
Bob,
thank you
thanks.
very
Talk
much.
to you.
We'll talk to you again real soon. Joe Soroselli, everybody. We've got to take a break, and we will be back with Bob Cox in just a few minutes. Enjoy the music for a moment while we take care of some other business. Is this Assemblyman Abenante? Hi, my apologies for the problems today. I moved the studio at home and we got crunched. I didn't get a chance to let everybody know. Can you come on at the same time tomorrow? I want to be sure to give you enough time. And again, I'm sorry about that. I've been trying to call and we've been missing one another. Sorry I had to call so many times. I'm limited as to my equipment. So tomorrow, if you call in around 8:45, we'll make sure you get plenty of time. Thanks, brother. Bye-bye. Well, some of you heard that. We had Assemblyman Abenante was going to be with us at 8:50 today, and we could not reach out to him to move him till tomorrow, but he has agreed to come on tomorrow, and he was terrific about it as we have repositioned the studio. Bob Cox will be joining us in just about a minute, but we want to share the weather with you, and the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. So that number you hear, we'll get to Bob in just a moment. Again, brought to you exclusively by one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. That is United Hebrew, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org. It's 43 degrees. It's rainy and windy. Going to get up to 60s today. Expect showers and high winds throughout the day, gusting from 50 to 60 miles an hour. There is a real risk of downed trees and power lines. Some thunderstorms are possible. Tonight, things will clear up a bit. It'll still be cloudy, breezy, scattered showers, 43 degrees. Tomorrow, a mixture of sun and clouds, 55, and into the nighttime, 38. Wednesday, mostly cloudy, some scattered showers, 46 during the day, getting down to 35 at night. Now, Thursday, partly sunny. We like that, 51, but it will also get down to about 36 on Thursday night. And please remember, we are supported this hour by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, pluginvirtualreality.com, and our friends at the Beachmont Tavern. Remember, they're open till late, so if you're up playing cards or researching stories, as our next guest probably is, and it's 11 o'clock at night, I want food. Well, you can call up the Beachmont Tavern because they're open till 1 a.m. You may even want to get a pop, too. 914-636-9533, 636-9533, the Beachmont Tavern. And it's time for our next guest, and I love to introduce this guest because his work is one of the things that inspired this radio station. His name is Bob Cox. More importantly, you know him as the managing editor of the Talk of the Sound news outlet, investigative journalist, considered the source since 2008. Couldn't help but think of him last night as I was killing a little bit of time watching the movie Spotlight, a movie that, if you will, puts the spotlight on investigative journalism. Please welcome, without further ado, the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, Bob Cox. Good morning, Robert.
Hey, Bob. Good morning. How are you?
Very good. It's great to hear you. There you are. You've been a busy bee. We saw some of the stories and updates regarding the school, particularly the lunch program and the food program. I don't want to go as far as to say that you predicted it, because you couldn't. How can one predict? But you warned them about spacing, about keeping distancing. But I understand that some people have come down with the virus and the program has had to be modified or even closed. Update us, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Because I'm not actually getting
Can you hear me?
through back on my end.
You getting feedback?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. That's
No,
okay.
I'm not hearing myself talking, but okay. If you can hear me,
I can hear you
out,
just
that's
fine. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, I did an assessment of the food distribution that was occurring, since the schools got shut down. And I wrote up the assessment actually at the request of the board president because she and I both sit on the district-wide health and he was concerned to hear what I was describing. I will tell you that it doesn't seem like the leadership of the district was actually going out looking at these sites themselves, and so they didn't really know what was going on from what I could tell because, as it turned out, Dr. Feo was sick with the coronavirus. She was, while awaiting her test results, she and everybody else was assuming they had coronavirus, and so they were all on self-isolation. So none of the leadership of the district was actually out and about during that week or so when the food program launched. So what I saw was pretty frightening. I wrote up an assessment. I shared it with school officials in my capacity on the Health and Safety Committee, but I didn't get any response. I sent a number of emails to the leadership, including the board and Dr. Feo and people in her administration. And to this day, I've never actually gotten a response. So I went ahead and I published what I had because I at least wanted to warn the public that situation was not good. And what I saw was nobody observing social distancing, workers working without gloves, no masks, and really none of the best practices of what you'd expect to see in a food distribution operation. And I basically summarized it by saying that the district had basically set up the perfect delivery mechanism for the widespread distribution of the coronavirus by bringing all these people together and then not observing any of these best practices to limit the spread of COVID-19. So part of that was I said that it seemed like the whole predicate for the operation was that nobody in New Rochelle had the coronavirus, which, given the fact that we were the epicenter for the coronavirus in New York State at the time, seemed absurd. And I asked the leadership of the district to consider what would happen if they had people testing positive at these different sites. They would end up having to send people home. They would have to shut down the site for a while. It would be very disruptive. The people who are going to one site who themselves might have been exposed to coronavirus through that first site would then go to some other site and therefore exacerbate the problem. Well, it didn't take long. On April 1st, Columbus School was shut down as a food distribution point after the principal there tested positive. Mm-hmm. All the workers were sent home for 14 days. I never got an exact count of how many that was, but when I was there, it was about 10 people working there. And then later, a food prep worker up at the high school where the kitchen is tested positive, and they sent home 35 people. So they were also sent home initially for 14 days. Where it got very muddled was later in the day, the district sent out a press release, and it said that there had been 35 people plus the person sick who were now home, and the food distribution at the high school was on hold. Therefore, no food was going to be going out to any of the food distribution points, not just Columbus, but all of them. And then they sent out a press release an hour later saying nobody was being sent home. And when I spoke to the district, their answer was they had received new guidance that said that these essential workers could go back to work. So I did look into that. I reached out to the CDC and the county. And what I discovered was something I wasn't aware of myself, which is that the New York State Department of Health and the Westchester County Department of Health had put out new directives, and really their advisories, their orders, not suggestions, that for essential workers, that they could return to work, provided that they did certain things like wore masks, gloves, didn't congregate in break rooms, and otherwise observed social distancing. So it was correct that there was guidance that said these essential workers could return to work. The problem was that guidance actually was put out on March 31st. So that didn't explain why they sent people home on April 1st from Columbus for 14 days. And this was now a week later, and they were sending 35 people home. Then they weren't sending them home. And my other question was, what about the people from April 1st that you sent home? Can they now go back to work? So I never got an answer to any of that stuff. And I would say that that's kind of typical of what's been happening with the school district, which is there's been a huge volume of words coming out of the superintendent and press releases and community messages, but not a whole lot of actual information. So basically what we've had going on is very much a PR campaign, and not really, in my view, telling people what they really want to know.
Well, that's so.
Let me stop there.
So where does it stand now? I mean, I understand that. I mean, is it shut down? Is the whole thing shut down? Are they renewing it? What's going on?
No, the food service is back up and running. It was shut down for a brief period of time so they could clean the facility. The workers were allowed to return to work. I'm not sure how many of them wanted to return to work after finding out that somebody had tested positive at their workplace. But the 35 people were sent home in the morning and told they'd been exposed to coronavirus. At some point, and I'm not clear when because they never answered, were told that they actually could return to work. The food service continued. It's continuing today. So where we're at right now is we're running the food service. I don't know that the situation's really gotten any better. So therefore, I have to expect that we're going to have more of this. I don't understand, and I asked this question and didn't get an answer. One of the things that they did in response to my assessment was they had the nurses start going out and checking everybody in the morning at 8 o'clock before they actually reported to work at these food distribution locations and food prep locations. So if everybody was being tested every day and screened, and they were had vitals checks, temp checks during the day, how did you end up with these people who were sick at work? And in one particular case, with the principal at Columbus who got sick, he actually got sick on March 25th, but he then went to work on the 26th and the 29th.
Eeks.
Which is staggering considering that the one message that's been consistent from day one, from the top to the bottom of our government, has been if you're sick, stay home. So why on earth would you go to work for 3 more days? I can't fathom that.
I am flabbergasted. I'm just flabbergasted. Can we, I guess you have to almost place blame. Where does this link back to? Who should have been supervising this and didn't? And not so much, just so we understand that this doesn't happen again, who was responsible for this?
Well, I mean, ultimately the Board of Ed and the superintendent are responsible. The person who's actually running the logistics for the food distribution is the school business official. But I mean, the buck stops with the superintendent. So, this is part of my concern about, what's been happening over the past month is that, yes, we're getting a lot of emails coming out all of the time, but they're not actually addressing the most important issues. And the number one issue is the health and safety of the people in the community. And I've been saying it since, mid-March, is that there's been this very cavalier attitude, which is predicated on the idea that people really aren't contagious and people really aren't going to get sick, when obviously that was never true. And it's certainly not true now because we've had 2 cases, and understand the implications, okay? At Columbus School, they had to close it down because the principal tested positive, okay? He was interacting with an awful lot of people because he was running the food distribution at that particular location. That includes interacting with the families who came to pick up food, okay? So one of the things I warned about was, since they're not keeping track of who's getting the food, they wouldn't have any way to communicate with those people about a problem with the food, like that somebody got sick. So, and think about this. In the case of the Columbus School, they didn't send out a press release. They didn't send out a district-wide communication. The only thing that went out was an email that went to the Columbus School community. And I've asked how that makes sense, given the fact that there's only 3 school district food distribution locations, and anybody 18 or under is eligible to go to them. So the people who are getting the food at Columbus School are not simply students and parents from that school. For starters, obviously, that school also includes the Isaac Young School District. It also includes New Rochelle High School. So you could have kids who are 14, 15, 16 years old, and they're getting their food at Columbus too, but they're not on the mailing list for the Columbus school. And then other schools in the area, elementary schools like Jefferson and Webster, would also be going to Columbus. But in reality, anybody could go to Columbus. And then what if you're a young mom and you've got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old? You're also going to Columbus, but you're not on the list. So why on earth would you only send a communication to warn the public that there had been a positive test at one particular school? And the message that went out to Columbus was that they were telling everybody who came in contact with the principal on the 26th and the 29th of March should self-isolate. Well, that would have to be only a small fraction of the number of people who actually came to the school. And when I went to the school, both on around April 1st and then after the kitchen shut down, there was no signage explaining anything about what was happening. So there was literally zero communication about what had happened with the Columbus shutdown to anybody except people who are on the Columbus school mailing list, which, like I said, I'm guessing that's 10%, 15% of the people who are actually going to that location, and no signage to explain to people what had happened. So if you showed up, you also didn't find out what was going on. So, I just say over and over again, the communication here has been extremely bad.
Well, clearly now, has there been any attempt to do this better? Have there been any recriminations, or are they just floating along? In other words, the principal of that school,
Well, I can't really answer that question.
But from the standpoint of your observations, has anything changed then, other than fixing the problem at the cafeteria? I'm just flabbergasted. My guest, Bob Cox, he's the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, and we're talking about his early stories and then the evolution of that story, leading to the closing of the kitchen and the way the distancing issue has been managed by the school district. We saw yesterday where the New York City schools will be closed for the rest of the season, and the governor has not yet made a decision. At this point, do you think it'll make much of a difference whether or not they open up for a month or a couple of weeks, or whether they close the schools, Bob?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not really clear what's going on with the New York City schools, because the governor has said that the mayor doesn't have the authority to make that kind of a decision. And I have to figure at the end of the day, the governor's probably right. And Cuomo's point was, I shut down the schools. I'll decide when they reopen. And that's not a decision that I've made yet. It's funny with the mayor of New York City, de Blasio, he was about the last person to, agree to shut down the schools in New York City. And now he wants to close them, for the rest of the school year. I don't know. I mean, I think I just go back to something I wrote back in the middle of, actually it was, I want to say it was March 12th, okay, which is the CDC guidance that was put out for New Rochelle because it was, the containment zone hotspot and all that stuff. That week, the CDC had put out guidance actually on the Monday. It didn't get made public till Wednesday night, and then I wrote about it on Thursday morning at about 6 a.m. That the guidance for New Rochelle specifically was that all the schools in New Rochelle be shut down, and that they remain shut down until 2 weeks after the end of spring break, which is the end of April. It actually comes out to be April 27th. Okay. And based on that, Cuomo had a press conference on that Monday. So that would have been, let's see, the 12th was the Thursday. Help me do the math, Bob. 11th, 10th, 9th, right? So
yeah.
Wednesday, yeah. So the March 9th.
Yes.
Governor Cuomo had a press conference, and he talked about At first, he said the New Rochelle schools are going to need to shut down, and then he actually ended up saying that the New Rochelle schools had shut down. This caused all sorts of controversy as to what was going on. But we now know, okay, something I was being told by my sources at the time, okay, was about the CDC guidance, okay, that they had directed the schools be shut down for 6 weeks. All right. The school district had that information. All right. So they knew exactly what Governor Cuomo was talking about on Monday. But Dr. Feo in particular pushed back very hard on that she didn't want to close the schools. And the reason that she gave had a lot to do with the food distribution, and it had a lot to do with the idea that somehow the kids were safer in the schools than they were roaming the streets of New Rochelle. Not that that was necessarily going to be the case, but in any case, that was what was happening on that Monday. On Tuesday, the governor then announced a containment zone and that he was shutting down all the schools within the containment zone, which included 3 of the schools, but 2 of the largest schools, and therefore about 50% of the student population. The response of Dr. Fehou was that she ordered then the schools to be shut down on Wednesday, the 10th. No, sorry, the 11th. Okay, even though the governor's order had said the 12th. Okay, and that I asked her about that at the press conference that she had on Wednesday, the 11th, and she gave her reason. It's on tape that she didn't want to close the schools because of the food distribution and because it was the safest place for kids to be. And the question I put to her was, why not shut down all the schools? Okay. And she did say, and she said a number of times, that she was following the CDC guidance. Now, nobody knew what the CDC guidance was, at least in the public, among the press. But we found out later that night, very late at night on Wednesday, the White House released the CDC guidance for New Rochelle. So we could see it. And what it said was, shut down all the schools for 6 weeks. So I have an issue with that because you're going around telling everybody you're following the CDC guidance. You're going to do what the CDC says, but in fact, they told you 2 days earlier to shut everything down. And you're misrepresenting that at the very least. I mean, that's being charitable. Okay. So I wrote an article the next morning that said they're going to have no choice. If they're going to follow CDC guidance, they have to shut everything down until the end of April. Okay. So meantime, other events were occurring, like the union was going crazy. Okay, and ended up writing this excoriating letter that she was endangering everybody and being reckless and whatever else they said, but it was pretty rough, okay, from Martin Daly, the president of the union, okay. Meanwhile, and I asked this question too, won't you get parents voting with their feet? In other words, they'll just not send their kids to the schools. You can open them up, they're just not going to come. And in fact, that was also occurring. In addition, the governor had issued a directive that said if a school had a person with a positive test, they would have to shut down for 24 hours. Okay. And by then, there was already one employee who was believed to have, but had not been lab confirmed. It was presumptive for COVID-19. Okay. So all of these things were happening. Okay. And so by the end of the day, Dr. Fehou announced that the schools were shutting down for 2 weeks. Okay. Now that was concurrent with what the governor was doing with it was basically the same period as the containment zone. So what's interesting about that is that there was a story that the district promoted the other day, just a couple of days ago, in Psychology Today magazine, of all places, that portrayed Dr. Fehou as some sort of Winston Churchill figure who had led the school district in this incredible situation with brilliant leadership by being proactive in shutting down the schools. And I could tell you from talking to people in this community, the reaction in New Rochelle that I've heard was universal, with shock that there would actually be an attempt to portray Dr. Fehou as proactive in shutting the schools down, when in fact she was the primary person resisting everybody, from the union, to the parents, to the governor, to the CDC. She was resisting everybody in all possible ways about shutting down the schools. The schools finally got shut down because she had no choice. The CDC directive became public. The governor was pushing for it. The union was pushing for it. And the parents were no longer sending their kids to school because they were getting less than 50% of the kids even showing up for school. So to portray that as proactive, as was done in this magazine article, was kind of sick-making. And in fact, the reaction was so negative that Dr. Feo put out a statement about it on Friday night. And basically saying that, she knows there's been some reaction to it, but then trying to claim that she had in fact she was the one who made the decision to shut down the 3 schools and then to shut down all of the schools. I mean, if you want to say on a technical basis that only the superintendent could make an order like that, then you can technically hang your hat on that. But if you want to talk about building trust in the community by being transparent, which is what this article is about, and in fact, there's a quote from her to that effect. Basically, this is HBO rules, right, Bob, on this streaming?
Yes.
So don't piss. So there's a saying which is, don't piss down my neck and tell me it's raining.
Right.
And that's what she's doing here. Okay, to put out there that she was proactive at shutting down the schools when everybody in this town knows that she was the sole person resisting. Okay, and by the way, she went around to all these schools on Thursday the 12th when she was sick. Okay, and in fact, we now know she was lab confirmed tested positive for COVID-19. Okay, and during her press conference, which we're now told from the Psychology Today article was some sort of calculated strategy to share her personal story to make her a more sympathetic figure. And I'd ask your listeners to think, why does she feel a need to present herself as a sympathetic figure? And I'll answer my question myself, because everybody in town knows she screwed up and they're upset about it. And she's got the union and the parents and a whole lot of other people really angry with her. So now she's going to try to rewrite history and make herself a sympathetic figure.
It is
But
9:30. Bob, I need to reset just a minute. It is 9:30. You're listening to Radio Westchester Mornings with Bob Marrone. We're the radio station at the train station, although we're broadcasting remotely to be consistent with all of the different requirements and the current zeitgeist. Bob Cox, the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008, is our guest. We're talking about the school district and the issues concerning the when and the closing of the schools and who ordered them, et cetera, et cetera. Continue, Bob, and then I want to move on to what's going to be very interesting, assuming if and when the schools reopen and those issues. But finish your thought. I just wanted to reset at 9:30 there. Go ahead.
During the press conference on March 21st, which she did from her home, which was a press conference on Zoom, the now infamous Zoom platform, which everybody seems to be using these days, she said that she made the decision to close down the schools, which was the first time I had heard her say that. And she said that she knew they were going to have to close Isaac anyway. Now, why was that?
Wow. Why is that?
Well, because they already had a presumptive case of coronavirus. That case had actually been brought to my attention by employees at Isaac for days. So she knew that they had somebody there who was presumed to have a coronavirus, was now home, but had been in school. And yet they kept the school open even at Isaac. They had other issues supposedly at other places like Albert Leonard. And so there's a general perception that the school district knew a lot more than they were telling people. And in fact, they were keeping schools open when there had been people who had been sick in the schools when they were open. So we also now, of course, know that on that same day she was visiting all the schools to talk about this, she herself was infected, all right? And now we have a whole other issue here, which we don't have the details on, so I want to be very careful about this, okay? She acknowledged that an employee had been sick with coronavirus while school was open. After school closed, there was still work going on among employees in the building, and one of those employees then also tested sick and then exposed his coworkers to it. So a lot of people had to be then sent home for that. So then we get this news that one of the employees at Isaac died from coronavirus. Now, one of the questions is, was this somebody who got sick when the school was open and then subsequently died? We don't have a timeline, but this is a critical question because we know somebody was sick while the school was open. That Dr. Fayho confirmed that herself, even though when she was talking, she said, we're not going to disclose certain cases. And then she proceeded to mumble her way through disclosing that there in fact been 2 cases at Isaac. If you include herself, there was 3 cases at Isaac because she was there. Okay. But was the person who got sick during that week school was open, that last week, is that the person who died? Because if that's the case, just think about the implications of that.
I am, and it's frightening. Bob, during this period, every municipality, cities, towns, so the federal government, the national government, counties, the state government, were disclosing the numbers of people and where they were for the sake of protecting others. And what I'm hearing you say is the school district didn't do that. But in their own schools.
Dr. Fayho addressed that. She said on her March 21st teleconference presser that the district had received guidance from the Westchester County Department of Health that they did not have to disclose if some employee or student got sick, with coronavirus, if the person had not been in school up until the day before they were symptomatic.
I see.
So she said that I don't know that to be true. She didn't actually produce any documentation to that effect, but that's what she said. Okay. But she then proceeded to disclose there had been 2 cases. Okay. And neither of which, according to her, the person was sick while school was open. But one person, it was actually a member of the buildings and grounds crew. Okay. One person was at the school building after it was closed, but while it was still being open for the custodians to work on it, to clean it, and also they were doing different construction stuff. Okay. So she decided to disclose that, even though it was after the kids were no longer in the school. But then when she was talking, she ended up backing into, and she kind of mumbled her way through it, that there had been this other case. I know it wasn't clear because I had to listen to it about 8 times on tape. And I also reached out to other media outlets who were on the call. And they also had reported there was 1 case at Isaac. And I said, if you listen to the tape, it sounds like she's saying 2. And then I was able to confirm independently that in fact it was 2. So even in that particular example, and that becomes sort of illustrative of the broader problem, we're still not getting an accurate bit of information. She also said that there was a student at one school who she knew was a positive for COVID-19. Of course, the question was, what school? And she said, I'm not going to say. Well, do you think that the parents at that kid's school, again, she's claiming that they have directives from the county Department of Health to that effect, that she doesn't have to disclose that. But you know what? Even if she has a directive that says you don't have to disclose it, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to disclose it.
I'm having a hard time believing that the Department of Health would give that directive. And I keep an open mind regarding the superintendent. I just can't accept that, because why would you put the other children in that school at risk and not disclose it? It doesn't make any sense based on the way this entire operation in terms of social distancing, et cetera, has evolved. It just doesn't make any sense, or unless I'm nuts. Which I take.
I think it does make sense. It does make sense if you go back to an interview I did with Dr. Fayho on November 1st, her first day. And I'm going to loosely paraphrase here, but I have the recording and I can go dig it out and play it. Because it was, generally so uninformative, I didn't bother with it because she gave a bunch of canned answers, and mostly that's what she does is she gives canned responses to things. And it's funny. I'm just going to back up. So the idea from the Psychology Today article was that by doing this press conference to talk about her personal medical situation, that was a way to communicate authenticity to the New Rochelle school community. Now think about that, right? Because what it's saying is her being open about her personal situation to create authenticity with the school community of her situation and identifying with the people of New Rochelle in and of itself was a calculated manipulation attempted to convince people of something by letting people into her home, literally, and take questions that, in some cases became very personal about using her bathroom and what her kids are doing and how food gets brought to her door and whatever else is going on. That in and of itself was calculated, a part of some kind of media strategy. The decision to close the school on Wednesday, March 11th instead of the 12th, as the governor ordered, we can now look back and see that was calculated specifically so she could say, I did it, even though the governor had just announced it was being done and the National Guard was being sent in. She wanted to be able to say, I did it. Okay. Why? Well, I think for the very reason we see in the Psychology Today article, that she wants to be able to rewrite history and be able to make it out that she was somehow proactive when in fact everybody in town knows that she wasn't. I mean, how bad is it, Bob, when her own medical director, went on to this popular Facebook group called the Moms of New Rochelle, which, full disclosure, the administrators all hate me, so they're not allowed to talk about me. I'm like Voldemort for on their group. But the medical director, Dr. Brooke Balchan, who listeners, readers probably know I'm not a big fan of, but she published on that group, to say, I'm keeping my kids home. Do whatever you want, basically, but I'm keeping my kids home. When the medical director of your school district is putting out that message, which is basically, hey, moms, don't send your kids to school.
You're
she is
pounding
directly
the table.
subverting.
I can hear it. Go ahead, Robert.
Me?
Yeah.
Very, very lightly. So
your equipment is
getting
excellent.
vibration.
So go ahead. I'm just kidding, but it's true. Go ahead.
No, that clearly the medical director is basically undermining the superintendent. And obviously she felt strongly enough about it to put herself out there publicly, knowing that the superintendent would obviously be very angry with her for doing that. So what goes into the calculation that says, as a medical director, I am going to bypass the superintendent who's telling people that school's the safest place to be, and I'm going to tell everybody I can, don't send your kids to our schools. Think about that.
Wow. We're talking with Bob Cox, managing editor and chief of the Talk of the Sound website, considered the source since 2008. We're talking about the school district and how their closing of the schools and management of the crisis has evolved to this point as we close up on 9:41. Bob, after hearing all of this and talking with you the last couple of weeks about this topic, I'm concerned not just about our school district, but all school districts. And you may want to wear both your hats, both as a journalist and as someone who's worked with health and safety for the school. I can't imagine how the schools can reopen without these kinds of issues, not necessarily how they were managed, but how these kinds of issues will be presented with us once again. For example, without a vaccine, how are we going to open up these schools?
Well, I would say two things about that. One is that, what came out of some of Dr. Fayhou's statements, even though she kept talking about the food distribution and whatever, she also said things that tell you what was really on her mind was that she didn't want to lose state aid. Okay? So the reality is that she is not going to do anything that's going to go against what the governor and state ed say regarding state aid. Now, right now, the schools can be closed up until the end of April 29th, because those days are not being counted as deducted from the 180 days. Now remember, New Rochelle is particularly sensitive to this issue because we're already under fire from the state because for the two middle schools, we weren't providing enough instructional hours. And we're facing about $1 million deduction in state aid just for that issue a year ago. So she's very sensitive to that. And I'm not saying she shouldn't be, but to me, it's very simple. The governor is going to make this decision, and it's going to have to be what are they going to do about the school days and what counts towards state aid, and how are you going to do things like a school budget in May if you still don't know exactly what the state aid formula is going to look like, and what's going to happen with things like summer school and stuff like that. So there's a lot of variables that go into this, and my expectation is we won't hear anything about this until the governor makes a decision about what they're going to do regarding the state aid days and summer school and stuff like that. That's at the end of April. So I think that's how that decision is going to get made. And it's not going to come at a local level. It's going to come at a state level.
It most certainly will, but I'm just wondering, I'll give you some scenarios. So let's, for the moment, assume that they don't close the schools for the rest of the season, the school year, and that they reopen, for argument's sake, in June. And little Johnny or a teacher in little Johnny's class comes down with the virus. Now, I doubt we will have reached the so-called herd immunity by then. Do they close that school? Do we start all over? In terms of health and safety, I realize this will have to be thought through. For the life of me, I can't see them reopening the schools on that basis. I just can't.
Well, the policy has been, and I don't know if it's going to change, but it's been that if you had a school that tested, with somebody testing positive, you shut the school down for 24 hours, you clean it, and then you reopen the school. Now, to your point, I happened to listen to a podcast about polio, and it was really about vaccines and how they worked. And so I'll share an interesting tidbit, which is, do you know where the word vaccine comes from?
You know, I read it but cannot remember. Go ahead.
Well, then you don't get a cookie.
No, I don't. I want my cookie. Which now you're going to get me started because I missed that they don't make marshmallow cookies anymore. Go ahead.
The first vaccine that was ever developed had to do with smallpox, and smallpox is related to cowpox. And what happened was this guy in England saw that the people who worked with cows, in particular the milkmaids who were milking the cows, were developing immunity to smallpox because they were getting cowpox from the cows. So he developed a way, which I won't get into here, to create what turned out to be a vaccine, a serum, that he injected this 8-year-old kid with, who then developed immunity to smallpox. Okay. Now, the word cow in Latin is vacca. So actually it has to do with cows. That's where the word vaccine comes
well, you know,
from.
I think I've already given you this one, and hopefully you forgot too. You do know where the term quarantine comes from.
Well, I mean, go ahead, share it.
All right. The word, you handled that well. It comes from back when Italy, and I forget it was one of the Baltic countries that Italy was then dominating. And it was during the plague of the Middle Ages, the Black Plague, when they had a 30-day if you will, quarantine. But then a new king came in and he said, no, I am extending it to 40 days. And in Italian, it's quaranta. So that's where quarantine comes from. In other words, ship came to the harbor. See, there's a little, it's not useless, folks. Now you know where these words derive from. But still, having said that,
So let me then go to polio, right? So
yes.
So this story was about the history of vaccines, and then in particular the battle between Jonas Salk, who developed one type of vaccine, and this other guy whose name escapes me. One was at the University of Pittsburgh, Jonas Salk, and one was at University of Cincinnati, the other guy. And Salk developed a dead virus vaccine, and the other guy was working on a live virus vaccine. Salk's came out first. That became widely used initially, But over time, the live virus was ready also, and that turned out to be that much more effective. And therefore, today, when you get polio vaccine, you're actually getting the guy from Cincinnati, the live virus vaccine, not the one that Jonas Salk developed, which has been deprecated. People don't use that anymore. However, in telling all this story, they talked about polio, right? And it has, relevance here because there was no vaccine for polio for forever, right? Until the 50s. But people were getting polio all along for decades. In fact, obviously, people know the case of Franklin Roosevelt getting polio and not being able to walk.
Mm-hmm.
So what did people do when you had outbreaks of polio? And Bob, at your age, you might remember, I talked to my mom, she remembers, she's in her 70s. And it was something that people lived in fear of, okay? You could die from it. Obviously, you could be crippled from it. And so it was something that was like a very scary thing that people over time just learned to live with. And if there was a polio outbreak, then, they would shut down a school, they would quarantine the person, they would either be basically quarantined to their bedroom in their own home, or if they didn't have a bedroom to be quarantined, they'd be sent to a hospital and put into isolation. But the point of this podcast was we lived with polio having no treatment and no vaccine for decades and decades of time. So I don't agree with the idea that we cannot do anything unless we have a vaccine and the treatment, because we've had a history of dealing with these guys. What you have to do is at some point when you get through this first wave is, yes, of course, work on a vaccine, work on treatments and all the other stuff that's going on. But I think that we're going to get to a point where we're going to accept the fact that there's going to be people getting sick from coronavirus for the foreseeable future, but that life is going to have to go on.
Well,
and therefore, to address your question about a school, that if there's a school that has somebody who tests positive for coronavirus or is presumed to have anybody developing a respiratory ailment, whether it's the flu or the coronavirus, is going to be assumed to have coronavirus. If some little kid shows up in a classroom, okay, and starts coughing, number one, every kid is going to run away. The teacher's going to run away, and they're going to assume that the kid's got coronavirus, okay? And so then whatever steps are going to be taken will be addressed. But we can't, I don't see how we can shut down the whole world until we have a vaccine.
Well, I think you're obviously right.
It could take a year.
Bob, going back to the polio issue, in your review of that podcast, did they say what the rate of death was? Do you know what the rate of death was from polio?
I don't know, but it was much, much higher than coronavirus.
Was its prevalence?
Coronavirus is...
Did as many people within a population get it?
Well, I don't know all the details of it.
No, I'm just wondering.
I
Because
just know that it was...
the essence of what you're saying, pardon me stepping on your lines there, but the essence of what you're saying is there was a time, and I'm neither supporting nor declining it, where we had to accept these kinds of risks in a greater way and just go on with life. And for hundreds of years, that was the case. Although during the Black Plague, there were, again, quarantines. It's an interesting dynamic. But
Bob, I mean, there will be quarantines. Okay, so if somebody has coronavirus, then they're going to be told to what we have now, Bob. And people don't necessarily understand this. Okay, what we had initially and what we have today is different. Okay. So in the case of Columbus School, okay, I reported on a parade of teachers that was done by Columbus School. And I mentioned in one of my articles that the principal who had tested positive was actually leading the parade. And people were outraged that the person should have been home and that they were contagious and all the rest of it. Well, I did check, okay? And actually the guidance on what you do with somebody who tested positive is different today than it was, let's say, March 1st. Remember, all those people who were quarantined back in early March in the north end of New Rochelle were kept on quarantine, and the policy was until you test negative, you're still positive and you're still under quarantine. Well, they released all those people from quarantine, but they actually changed the policy. So now it's that you count 7 days from when you first felt symptomatic, Okay. In the case of Michael Gallen, the principal at Columbus, it was March 25th.
Mm-hmm.
To do a minimum of 7 days, but you have to have 3 consecutive days of no fever without the use of a fever-reducing medication.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to have a decline in respiratory problems, that your coughing has not completely gone away, but that it has been diminishing. And at that point, you can then go to the second phase, which is you no longer have to isolate in your home. You can do stuff, but you have to wear a mask. You can't go to grocery stores, pharmacies, things like that. You got to basically avoid crowds and avoid contact, but you can go out and about. So in his case, he was in his car. He had a mask around his neck, but he wasn't wearing it when I took the picture because he was driving down the street, and I guess he was waving to everybody. But he was obviously, far enough away from people that it really wasn't an issue. But so there was a lot of misinformation when that story ran. People jumped on him and screaming and yelling about how could he do that? He's supposed to be at home. Well, actually, that's not our policy anymore. And our policy is that if a school has a case, it shuts down for 24 hours and gets cleaned. If you get coronavirus, you can be required to isolate at home, be quarantined for no more, for as little as a week. Okay. And then if you're feeling better and you don't have the fever and you don't have the coughing, you can go about your business. So that's the world that we've gotten to today, not what we were talking about in the first half of March. So a lot has changed, and I don't think a lot of people have caught up with those changes. So if we get to the point, let's say, the governor's pause ends at the end of April. So in May, right, if we have schools reopening, what's going to happen is if somebody gets a positive test, then they're going to shut down the school for a day. They're going to clean it. They're going to do tracing back to find out who that person was in contact with. In the meantime, right, what you'd expect to see is that at the schools themselves, they're going to have to come up with some social distancing policies. For example, you're going to have to, for example, I don't know how you're going to move the kids around in the hallways. Okay, they can't all just leave a classroom at the ring of a bell, like at the high school, because then they're all in the hallway together. Or how can you do the cafeteria? How can you do kids entering the building and going through an ID check? You're going to have everybody in line 6 feet apart. So it could take an hour, to check everybody in the day. I don't know how you would do the meals where everybody's going to be 6 feet apart. There's no way. The cafeterias are already too crowded.
It almost seems like you need to elongate the school day. You need to elongate the school day to have things more sequenced, I should think.
Well, I don't know what they're going to do. What's going to happen is the government's going to come up with requirements as to what the school districts have to do. It'll come from state ed, and they'll say that you're going to have to come up with a plan to have no more than this many people doing this, and whatever the plan is going to be. And then we may be following that plan for a year or two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? Because in the meantime, you
I just want to reflect here for a second. I'm going back to what you said at the initial part of this segment, which is that at some point in time we are going to have to live with this virus and do best practices, but move on. And that is inevitable, whether it's at the end of this year or the beginning of the next school year, and it's inevitable in society, isn't it?
Well, it could be in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
because the government programs, the state and federal program, are all basically for the month of April. And obviously everybody knows that the president wants to reopen as quickly as he can. And look, the fact of the matter is we deal with the flu and the common cold, and there's no magic cure for that. There's no vaccine for that, really. I mean, you can get a flu shot every year, but even those flu shots are not 100% effective. I think that the best ones are maybe 60% effective. So we live in a world where you can get sick from a lot of things. And I'm not dismissing the problem with coronavirus, which is that there's no vaccine, but we have lots of things there's no vaccines for. And, it's spread very easily. And we don't have like a really good mitigation for it or treatment for it. So, and then you look at the reality, which is that 84% was the last number I saw of the people who are dying are over 60.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have a special situation for people, especially in nursing homes and places where you're going to have large groups of older people. We're going to have to come up with something, but what we can't do is just have the government keep printing money to the tune of trillions of dollars and then end up in a situation where we have hyperinflation and nobody can eat. So instead of dying of coronavirus, you're literally dying of starvation. And if you think that can't happen, it's happened plenty of times over the course of history. It's happened even in the last 10 years. You had hyperinflations in places like Argentina, Brazil. You now have it in Venezuela. People can't buy a loaf of bread.
I mean,
Okay?
and you
So
well
at some
know,
point, you can't keep doing that.
and you know as well as I do that I think it cost after the depression in the effect in Germany, it cost 100,000 Reichsmarks to buy a loaf of bread. Inflation, and that's
Actually, it was actually in the 20s, and it cost 80 billion.
Was that right?
Marks.
Oh, I thought it was even
Reichmarks. Well, Reichmarks was under Hitler.
Well, after Hitler, right? But Marx, you're absolutely right. Yes.
No, before Hitler.
Yes, no, I know that.
It was what led to the rise of Hitler. It was 80 billion marks.
Something ridiculous.
So effectively, people were literally bringing wheelbarrows full of cash to buy food.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, but if you think that can't happen, you don't understand economics. You cannot keep printing money indefinitely. Right now, we're able to do it because you have the full faith and credit of the government. However, people may not remember this, but under the last administration, for the first time in however many years, history, the United States government's bond rating dropped from AAA to AA. So our bond rating is actually not as high as it once was. And by the way, guess who buys all of our bonds?
The Chinese do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I know they own an awful lot of us. Bob, thank you very much. A great job as usual, Bob Cox. Please check out his outlet, Talk of the Sound. Consider the source since 2008. Just one quick note. I mentioned it at the beginning. Every time I've watched Spotlight 2 or 3 times now over the last few years. You must love that movie because of the investigative journalism involved.
Not only do I love that movie, but at one point I tweeted about the movie, and the woman whose name escapes me right now, who's portrayed in the film as one of the investigators.
You're Rachel.
It was during when it was up for the. When it was up for an Academy Award, and I tweeted about it, and she actually responded to my tweet. I'll dig it out someplace. So
yeah,
I was
you
very
should.
pleased about that because yes, I do love that movie. I think it's great. It's one of the better ones. But I think it's also, particularly interesting to me, as you're probably alluding to, which is that what happens when they start to try to expose what's going on. It turned out that everybody knew, right, including the paper itself.
Yes, and it came out in that
part
movie.
Of the story.
Well, the part that made me think
knew.
of you doubly, Bob, was if you when you rent the movie or you buy the DVD, they have the other features and the round table at the end, and their concerns that we don't have enough local journalists doing what you do. Was a really important feature because that was a local paper. I mean, the Globe has national prominence, but it was a local paper. But even down to the city level, which is where you work, the city and the town level, there's just not enough investigative journalism. So please keep doing what you're doing.
I will. And by the way, Bob, I will let your listeners know that we've been making progress on doing podcasting. So
can't wait.
I've actually, I got the first one put together from these interviews. And so what we're going to do is basically use these to be a Talk of the Sound podcast where we're talking about what we cover in Talk of the Sound. There'll be this other one, Words and Edgewise, but what I had to do was I had to upload the first files to the directories so that it could be in things like Apple Podcasts or iTunes. It could be in Spotify, whatever. So that all happened. And so now the approvals are starting to come back. And so once we're in all the directories, then we'll be ready to actually sort of publicize that you can listen. So for people who can't listen live to this, they'll be able to listen asynchronously, as they say, at their own
Asynchronous.
convenience
I like
by
that word.
using whatever. Big word. Well, that's this has turned into the vocabulary episode, right? We have vaccine, we have quarantine, and so we're on a roll.
Well, Rob, thank you very, very
think we
much.
should-
Bob Cox, I really appreciate it. Please keep doing what you're doing, and we'll talk soon. Take care. That slams the lid on everything for today, folks. It is 10:03. Is that good fidelity or what? Yeah, I like that. All righty, we have people to thank, places to go, people to see, all the rest of it. It is Monday, April 13th, 2020. The weather, as you know, it's 40 degrees right now. It's going to get up to the mid-60s. Please be careful in terms of any trees around your property, or if you have lawn furniture out, showers, high winds throughout the day, gusting from 50 to 60 miles an hour, risk of downed trees and power lines, thunderstorms are possible. Also, George Latimer will be addressing the county via Facebook, I believe, at 11 o'clock. See when and if the testing site at Glen Island and other locations, those sites will be reopened. The weather brought to you exclusively by our friends at United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org. Aging Issues Management brought you this hour. So too did the law firm of Pena and Khan, pluginvirtualreality.com, and of course the Beachmont Tavern. Remember, they open late at 11:30, but they close at 1 o'clock in the morning. So when Bob Cox is sitting out on his deck, smoking a cigar or having a nice little drink or perhaps iced tea or something, he can order a burger or some other meal from the Beachmont Tavern, and he can call 636-9533, 636-9533. They'll deliver it, or he can take a little run over there and pick it up. The bag will be waiting when he arrives. And we thank them for their patronage as well, the Beachmont Tavern. I want to thank our guests today, Vince Russo, George Latimer, Joe Soricelli, of course, Bob Cox. And we did move Mr. Abenante. Assemblyman Abenante will be with us tomorrow, and we hope to have a very special guest regarding the coronavirus in the 7 o'clock hour. We also will be talking with A.J. Woodson, Ivar Hayden, and Harlan Allman. Thank you very much for listening today, folks, and we'll see you tomorrow at 6:30. Reported the case yesterday. California officials said the person is a resident of Solano County, northeast of San Francisco, and is getting medical care in Sacramento. Meanwhile, the novel coronavirus has killed at least 2,800 people worldwide, mostly in China. There have been more now than 82,000 global cases with infections in every continent except Antarctica. And for the first time, the number of new cases reported outside of China in one day was larger than those reported inside China. Now, South Korea has seen a spike, more than 1,700 cases there, and they have stalled South Korea, joint U.S. South Korean military drills. They have been postponed. And in Saudi Arabia, this is no small thing if you understand this dynamic. They have suspended pilgrimages to Mecca and Medina for people outside the country over coronavirus fears. The kingdom, which bills itself as the custodian of Islam's two holiest sites, will open religious rituals to residents and nationals only. And here in the United States, Health and Human Services Secretary Alexander Azar stressed that he was still in charge of the task force addressing the novel coronavirus following President Donald Trump's announcement that Vice President Michael Pence would lead those efforts to battle the outbreak. Just minutes before Trump had said Pence would lead the U.S. government's response to the coronavirus, Azar's post-news conference statements muddled the message on who is in charge. But again, it's pretty typical for a president to name their vice president to head something up. Most likely he will work through the aforementioned cabinet. member. And in a significant story coming out of Washington yesterday, this out of the Associated Press, the Trump administration can withhold millions of dollars in law enforcement grants to force states to cooperate with U.S. immigration enforcement. A federal appeals court in New York ruled Wednesday in that decision that conflicted with three other federal appeals courts. The ruling by the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan overturned the lower court's decision, and that will obviously have an effect here in New York. Again, the concept of withholding money if you are a sanctuary city. The courts, just to sum it up, have sided with the president's position on that. We go now locally. The federal trial between the Spring Valley's NAACP and the East Ramapo School District is wrapping up. This in News 12 today. The NAACP has claimed that for years the school district's at-large process of electing school board members favors the majority white community and favors a district voting system. The majority white school board has cut school budgets and slashed programs for public schools where most minority students attend, despite overwhelmingly sending their kids to private schools. So the case has hit a snag, a little bit of a snag. The judge ordered a prominent Rockland County rabbi to testify, but he refused. And that is a case where that's a lawsuit from a legal perspective. It's been well established that the money had been redirected from the public schools to the private schools. We will keep you updated on that story. It is 6:38. Federal prosecutors told a judge Wednesday they'll need another 10 weeks to sort through the voluminous information involving the accused sex trafficker there. And we're trying to figure out why we have as much, a little bit of hissing there. Our apologies, we'll look into it. Accused sex trafficker and extortionist Lawrence Ray before the evidence can be turned over to the defense. And the reason it's taking so much time, the material included 44 computer hard drives, 37 cell phones, 5 laptops, 2 desktops, and I can go on, and let's just say a porridge and a pear tree. Ray, 60, was arrested at his home in Piscataway, New Jersey, back on February 11th, charged with sex trafficking and forced labor at least at a dorm. An off-campus dorm is where he's alleged to have run this operation at Sarah Lawrence College. Yonkers, the city council there has passed a ban on aggressive panhandling in hopes of curbing downtown street begging that is plaguing that city. The members adopted the general ordinance that would ban aggressive begging in public places 7-0. And they've sent the bill along to Mayor Mike Spano. The legislation, modeled after a similar New York City ban, would also specifically prohibit solicitation within 10 feet of banks and cash checking or check cashing businesses. I can get it right once in a while. Police Commissioner John Mueller told the Legislative and Codes Committee last week that the legislation is in response to an uptick in panhandling. 10 of the 12 Democrats battling for the open seat in the 17th Congressional District here, Westchester / Putnam, debated on one stage. I'm sorry, I said Putnam, and it's actually Westchester and Rockland. They demonstrated on one stage in Nyack, and for the first time last night. The seat will be made vacant as Representative Nita Lowey announced last fall that she planned on retiring. Attendees observed that many of the candidates were respectful of their time, their answers, and each other. In fact, News 12, who gave us the story, asked the candidates which of their opponents they felt was the least qualified, and many answered that they felt that all of their opponents would be fit for the position. This is unusual in this day and age, but we'll take it. This out of Milwaukee, and this isn't an international story, it's a horrible national story, but an employee opened fire Wednesday at Milwaukee's Molson Coors complex, killing 5 fellow workers before taking his own life. The governor was identified as a 51-year-old Milwaukee man who died of self-inflicted gunshot wounds. And as we have more about that story, so too will you. A real sign of the time, folks, is that this story isn't top news. It is, and you won't like me saying this, but I'm going to. These mass shootings are a sign and a product of Americana. Why is a story for another day, perhaps many other days. And the story that we had for you 2 days ago